Mount Rushmore. Four faces carved into a 60 feet tall cliff, staring out over the Black Hills. Each one stood for a different chapter of the country's journey. And I've been watching SpongeBob almost my entire life, 20-something years. And somewhere along the way, I started asking myself a stupid, funny question. If I had to carve 4 episodes into a cliff, if I had to build the Mount Rushmore of SpongeBob SquarePants, which 4 would it be? Now, I need you to understand something before we start climbing. This is not a best episodes list. I'm not here to tell you the 4 objectively perfect SpongeBob episodes, because the argument would never end and nobody ever wins it. This is my Rushmore Mountain. These are the 4 episodes that define what SpongeBob is to me, to the kid who grew up on it, and the adult who never quite left. And I'll be honest with you up front, 3 of these I love with my whole heart, but the 4th one, I resent it. And yet it earned its place anyway. Every mountain needs a foundation. Every country needs a founder. And on Rushmore, that's Washington, the first and biggest face that got placed dead center. Because before you can expand or develop a country, somebody has to define what that even means. So who's the Washington of SpongeBob? Now, the obvious answer, or the lazy answer, would be the pilot episode, Help Wanted. And while I get the logic, it's the founding document, right? It's where it all starts. SpongeBob wants the legendary job. He gets the job, and the rest is history. But I don't think that's the foundation of this show. Let me explain. When you watch Help Wanted, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this show would be about a workplace comedy. It's a little sponge who flips burgers at an underwater fast food joint, and every week we'll get some new disaster at the fry station. And listen, while the Krusty Krab is the beating heart of this show, that's no argument. A huge chunk of this series happens behind that glass door. But that was never the whole story. The episode that actually tells you the heart of this show is Sleepy Time. Because in Sleepy Time, SpongeBob falls asleep and he starts drifting into the dreams of everyone in Bikini Bottom. And what do we see? We see the inside of these characters. We see what Squidward wishes he was. We see what Mr. Krabs seeks in life. We see Gary in his brilliant inner mind. We drift through the private inner life of this entire main cast in one night. And that's the bedrock of this show. Underneath the burgers and the boating school and the jellyfishing, this show was about these characters. It was about what happens when a sponge and a starfish and a squid or octopus and a crab keep colliding with each other through the dumbest possible circumstances on a random Tuesday morning, and somehow make a whole life out of it. This show is about everything it ever wanted to be. One week it's a pizza delivery went wrong. The next, it's a haunting place called Rock Bottom, where the rules of physics are non-existential. The next, it's a lonely liminal space called SB-129. It goes anywhere. It'll be a musical, a horror short, a time travel episode, but the engine never changes. It's these characters and their inner worlds bumping into each other, and Sleepy Time is the episode that defines it better than the rest of Season 1 counterpart. But a foundation is just a starting line. A great country doesn't become a country by staying small. At some point, it has to reach wider. It has to grow past its own borders and find out how big it could get. And SpongeBob's about to find out. Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, the man who signed off on the Louisiana Purchase and basically doubled the size of the country overnight. He deserves to be on that mountain because he's the moment America looked at its own borders and went, nah, we can be bigger than this. And the episode that does exactly that for SpongeBob is Band Geeks. We all could collectively say that Band Geeks is one of the greatest episodes of television ever made, period. And even if you somehow disagree with that, I don't think you would be offended anyway. It is that good of an episode. But that's not why it's on my mountain. That's not the only reason. Anyway, it's on my mountain because it's a proof of how big the show has become. Think about what this episode actually does. It starts about Squidward, who was humiliated, baited into leading a garbage marching band just so Squilliam could make fun of him later. And then the episode just decides to go to the Bubble Bowl, with a live-action human audience staring down at these cartoon characters, like they wandered in from another dimension. This was the show expanding its own borders, physically, literally pulling our reality into theirs. And then they play Sweet Victory, one of the single most recognizable pieces of music to ever come out of a kid's cartoon, a song people are still screaming for at the Super Bowl decades later. But more than just that, this is roughly the moment SpongeBob is about to hit its ceiling in the real world too. In the early 2000s, this show was everywhere. People were waiting for new episodes like event television. It had conquered the culture. So you've got the show expanding its borders inside the story. The Bubble Bowl, the human crowd, the anthem. At the exact same time, it's expanding its borders outside the story all over the planet. The map got bigger in both directions at once. But every empire hits a moment where they realize progress is good, but how long can we survive what's coming? Because the people who built this show brick by brick aren't gonna stay forever. Abraham Lincoln, the hardest face to carve, and the most important one, because instead of founding or expanding the nation, his legacy stands for survival, the moment the country nearly tore itself apart from the inside, and somehow had to hold it together. So when did SpongeBob face its civil war? Well, of course, after the first SpongeBob movie in 2004, the show was supposed to end. That was the plan. Krusty Krab number 2 was the finale, but at that point, the show was too big to die, so it kept going. And with Hillenburg stepping back and Paul Tibbitt taking over as showrunner, this whole new era began, with the founders no longer fully at the wheel. They had to come up with something to preserve the show both inside and outside. And in my mind, there are only 2 episodes that define the post-first movie era SpongeBob better than everything else. It's Breath of a Fresh Squidward or Have You Seen This Snail? I mean, look, it might be confusing why I'm even considering Handsome Squidward for this, but that one joke is just so fresh and iconic at the time. It basically carries that season alone. They never did this bold of a joke before, and so I personally think that alone is enough to preserve SpongeBob in the transition era. But nonetheless, there are better choices, and the ultimate pick for the Abraham Lincoln episode of SpongeBob is the first half-hour special after the movie. Have You Seen This Snail? One day, SpongeBob gets a paddle ball. He gets obsessed, tries to beat some insane world record, and in the process, he completely neglects Gary for days. And Gary, starving and ignored, does one thing you'd never think he'd do. He leaves. Gary wanders off into the city, gets taken in by a sweet, lonely old woman who turns out has a long history of pets who didn't stay alive for long. And meanwhile, SpongeBob realizes what he's done and tears the whole town apart looking for him. This show almost never goes all in on despair for a whole episode. It flirts with it, sure, but other episodes like Dying for Pie only get heavy in the last third. The Closest Cousin is dumped, where Gary leaves SpongeBob for Patrick. Again, that's more of jealousy for the most part. But Have You Seen This Snail commits to the ache from front to back. They even gave us a sad song that has genuinely made grown adults cry. And they pulled this at the exact moment the show needed to prove it could still run. The golden age is behind it, and instead of falling apart, the show reaches down and proves it still has the soul, that SpongeBob and Patrick and Gary could still carry the whole thing forward into a new age. And this is where my mountain gets uncomfortable, because the first 3 faces, those are legacy. Those are the episodes that made me who I am about this show. Meanwhile, the 4th face isn't love. The 4th face is the moment the whole thing changed. And I need you to stay with me on this one, because it's the most important pick I'm gonna make, and it's the one you're gonna want to argue the most with. Theodore Roosevelt, the father of modernization. Roosevelt's on that mountain because he started the modern industrial power we know now. But the thing about Roosevelt is that modernity in its application is a trade. Sure, you get bigger, you get more powerful, but you have to lose something in the process. The country got industrial, which means efficient, means mechanized, means a little bit colder than the thing it used to be. And that is Modern SpongeBob. And for whatever reason, the episode that marks the turn for me is Trench Billies. Now, let me tell you why. Because if I just said, here's a bad episode on my Mount Rushmore, you'd click off, and you'd be right too. But I assure you, this isn't only about it being bad. Stay with me. Here's my whole theory of how SpongeBob grows. Every time this show tried to expand this show's lore, they had a few ways around it. Maybe a new place, a new character, a new pocket of lore hiding just outside the usual Bikini Bottom, like Rock Bottom, or SB-129's Empty Void, the Flying Dutchman's ship, and even the island on the surface. The show reached past Bikini Bottom, added something strange and new, and it worked. It felt bigger, stranger, and more alive. But look at Trench Billies. This episode does the exact same move, where SpongeBob and Patrick fall down a deep-sea trench and find a whole hidden society down there, a clan of hillbilly anglerfish called the Trench Billies. It is an expansion, except this time it feels hollow. For one, it's a retread of Rock Bottom, with roughly the same premise, SpongeBob and Patrick stranded in a strange society far below the world they know, except with none of the magic wonder. Second is that the Trench Billies aren't mysterious, they're just ugly redneck stereotypes. The whole place doesn't feel deep, and rather empty. And it ends with Mr. Krabs getting shotgun married to their matriarch for the crime of making eye contact. It even feels worse nowadays when you realize this wasn't some random Tuesday episode. Trench Billies was part of Legends of Bikini Bottom, a whole miniseries built specifically around the idea of expanding the SpongeBob universe, where they would add new legends, new corners, and new lore. I mean, the show announced with a banner and everything, we are going to make the world bigger. And what came out of it was this. That's Roosevelt of SpongeBob. This is the moment SpongeBob learned how to do its signature move, expand the world as an industrial process. They crank out a new location, bolt on some new characters, package it as an event, but the magic drained out of it. But more importantly, I still vividly remember that Trench Billies was the first time I sat there watching SpongeBob and felt genuinely, deeply out of place. Like I was seeing a friend after 10 years of not meeting him, and you hardly recognize him, both face and personality. I don't resent this episode specifically because it's bad. I mean, plenty of episodes are bad. I put it on the mountain because it's the very moment that cemented SpongeBob is changing for my little brain. And a monument isn't only for the parts you love, it's for the parts that define you, even the ones that broke your heart a little. It's the fourth face of SpongeBob. So there it is, my Mount Rushmore of SpongeBob. 3 I love, 1 I resent, and every single one of them carved into the cliff anyway, because without it, SpongeBob wouldn't be SpongeBob to me. But the thing about a personal Mount Rushmore is that mine isn't yours. You grew up on a different SpongeBob than I did, a different founding episode, a different peak, and definitely a different heartbreak. So what's on your mountain? Carve it out for me. And hey, behind every face, voices are just as important. Just like the president, there are people who gave these characters a soul and then went off and played 100 other roles you'd never in a million years connect to Bikini Bottom.
There's one SpongeBob episode that messed with your brain more than you can remember. And no, it's not the Splinter or the one where he dates a sandwich. It's one that hides behind something cute and soft and a little too comforting. Because modern SpongeBob loves to get nasty, right? But this episode, it takes all that chaos and pain and turns it into something that feels safe, at least on the surface. Because the deeper you look, the more it starts to feel like they're trying to brainwash everyone around it, even us, the viewers. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why that's dangerous. The episode starts with the late shift at Krusty Krab. SpongeBob is cleaning the restaurant after a long day's work. Squidward's there too, obviously hating everything that moves. Just a normal day at the Krusty Krab. Until Squidward finds something quite familiar. A Krabby Patty that's old, gray, and covered in mold. It's the Nasty Patty all over again. But just when Squidward's about to throw it out, SpongeBob stops him, says it's wrong to throw away a Krabby Patty. The man clearly didn't learn anything from his last food romance, or from Mr. Krabs' near-death experience with the Flying Dutchman. So he takes one bite, and instantly regrets every decision he's ever made. He turns green, stomach gurgling, and barely holding it together. And just as he runs out back to recover, something comes up. Something we never saw coming. A shadow falls over him. A hairy hand touches his shoulder, and a soft voice asks,
"Are you doing all right there, friend?"
He turns around, and standing there is a giant, fuzzy, Totoro-ish hamster in a necktie. His name is Cuddle E. Hugs. And out of the blue, Cuddle says he's SpongeBob's new best friend. Of course, SpongeBob, being SpongeBob, accepts this instantly. Just immediate, unconditional love. And just like Cuddle's sudden appearance, the story itself suddenly jumps. Now we're seeing a montage of them having fun over the Best Day Ever soundtrack. It almost feels wholesome. Almost. But here's where the story gets uncomfortable real quick. Everyone around them is just staring with these weird, almost concerned looks in their eyes. Look, a mother won't let her children watch SpongeBob and Cuddle tickling each other in the park. Something is clearly wrong here. Even when SpongeBob brings Cuddle back home, Gary gives him the same concerned look. Like, "You good, bro?" But SpongeBob doesn't pay any attention to those concerns. He's just having fun with his new best friend. Too happy to question it. Little does he know, this ignorance is going to cost everyone later. The next morning, Cuddle's gone, but the bed's clearly trashed, exactly how it is the night before. He tried asking Gary, but the snail just gave him the same response. So, in despair from losing his new best friend, SpongeBob decides to eat his moldy Krabby Patty once again to ease his sorrow. Because that's what normal people do when they're sad, consume something toxic. And sure enough, right on cue, Cuddle reappears. By this point, it's a no-brainer to say this huge, fluffy hamster has something to do with the foul sandwich. Hallucination or not, SpongeBob's clearly hooked. But we don't have to wonder for too long, because the next scene makes it all clear. Every time SpongeBob introduces Cuddle to someone, Squidward, Patrick, or Sandy, they all just stare in confusion. There's nothing there. Even Patrick calls him out for hugging thin air. Can I just say, you know something's wrong when Patrick sounds more reasonable than you?
SpongeBob's my best friend! Mine!
Okay, maybe not that reasonable, but still, point stands. And at first, it's funny. Oh, SpongeBob's on another imaginary friend chapter today. But the longer he spends with Cuddle, the more his friends start to look like the crazy ones. By now, SpongeBob is clearly dependent on moldy patties. He misses Cuddle when he's gone, he gets anxious, and the second he eats another bite of that old patty, Cuddle comes right back. Bigger, brighter, sweeter. Like a hit. Then Cuddle drops the line that changes everything. He says SpongeBob's friends can't see him because they haven't eaten the magic sandwich. If that's not a clear reference to magic mushroom, I don't know what is. The episode wastes no time to escalate the story. SpongeBob immediately goes back to the Krusty Krab, pulls out the rotten patty, chops it up into pieces, and starts handing it out for free. To everyone. Customers, friends, even Mr. Krabs. And they all eat it. Because SpongeBob calls it aged, like it's some kind of fancy wagyu. And because, well, free food works better than peer pressure ever will. Then everyone starts reacting the same way. Nausea, dizziness, and then, just like SpongeBob, they see him. The giant, smiling, Totoro-esque hamster that was never really there. Now visible to everyone. And the moment that happens, the tone of the entire episode changes. They're all admiring Cuddle, all hugging him with big smiles. Now the whole restaurant shares the same trippy experience instead of just judging SpongeBob. And I'll admit, there's a moment where it almost feels wholesome. Everyone in Bikini Bottom happy for once. Smiling, laughing, snuggling into the big fuzzy creature like they've been waiting for this moment their whole lives. SpongeBob just stands there, glowing, proud of himself, like he finally fixed whatever was wrong with the world. Except, he didn't fix it. He just dragged everyone into the same trip that he's on. And just when you think the plot couldn't get any weirder, Cuddle starts eating people. He devours them one by one, and the show plays it like a dream sequence, like it's still pretending everything's fine. SpongeBob tries to stop it, but it's too late. Everyone's already gone. The only person who still sees this as wrong is Squidward. He's just standing there, flabbergasted at seeing everyone tripping and stacking themselves onto each other. I would have done the same. Ironically, from SpongeBob's perspective, this is where the hallucination betrays him. It stops being comforting and shows its real shape. Cuddle-E Hugs is the infection itself. The voice that tells you that everything's okay while it's already eating you alive. And then, just like that, the night's gone out of control. Morning comes, everyone wakes up on the floor, dizzy, angry, and hungover from the hallucination. The Krusty Krab is trashed. Nobody remembers what happened, just that they feel used. Everyone leaves SpongeBob behind at the end, and in the silence that follows, SpongeBob does something terrifyingly simple. He pulls the last piece of the rotten patty from his pocket and eats it. He just wants an answer from his best friend. And for a moment, he gets it. Cuddle appears, smiling, laughing like nothing ever happened. He even jokes about the night before, said it's only normal because Eats is his middle name. Yes, Cuddle, Eat, Hugs is the name of the hamster. Which ironically is also the only things you want to do when you're high. But before he can say anything else, SpongeBob gives Cuddle a taste of his own medicine. Cuddle starts to choke, his colors drain, and we cut to a little girl's bedroom. The walls covered in SpongeBob merch as Cuddle wakes up screaming. And that's the final twist. Turns out the real Cuddle-E Hugs was tripping too off his own pellets. That's where it ends. Cuddle's gone, SpongeBob's alone, and we're left confused. Like we've just woken up from a bad dream we can't remember. At this point, we all know that the episode is about an accidental trip, but there's a lot worse things happening than just being high. At first glance, this all feels like a food joke gone too far. SpongeBob eats something rotten, starts seeing things, and drags everyone into his mess. And while it's true, the mold itself is the one tiny detail that drives the whole story. But then the real danger in this story is about how easy it is to drag everyone into your experience without knowing it. One single idea, once planted, can change the way you see the world. The mold acts as more as a metaphor for how thoughts spread. You take in something small, something strange, and it grows into your mind until you can't tell what's good or bad anymore. And once SpongeBob shares that belief, it starts spreading fast. All SpongeBob needs to do is put some fancy name on it and start handing it out for free. But really, he's just spreading his own sickness, or should I say, his own trip. Now, to be fair, there's a real-world reference for this idea. Some fungus can indeed release chemicals that mess with perception. Historians even believe magic bread that was popular in the Middle Ages came from grain contaminated with ergot, the same fungus that inspired LSD centuries later. People would see things, hear voices, even experience group-wide visions. Sound familiar? But what this episode captures better than anything else is how psychological contagion works. You can actually catch an emotion, a belief, even a behavior, just by being around someone who feels it strongly enough. It's how mass hysteria starts, or how cults grow. One person's certainty becomes everyone's truth. It's the same phenomenon psychologists call folie à deux, or madness of two, just like what happens with Joker and Harley Quinn. Except this time, it's the madness of a whole restaurant. What's more disturbing is that the moment everyone starts seeing Cuddle-E Hugs, they stop questioning reality. They don't ask why it's happening or what may have caused it, they just accept it, because everyone else is doing the same thing. Modern SpongeBob's tone has always leaned on exaggerated positivity, the kind that almost demands you smile along with it, despite the gruesome things that happen in the background. And for better or worse, this episode pushes that to an extreme. A literal monster made of affection that devours anyone who gives in. But hey, at least the writers give them a good reason to smile through it this time, right? You could think of it like a psychological trick that's used everywhere, from something like advertising to social media. Just repeat something warm, familiar, and harmless enough times, and your brain stops asking questions. You start craving comfort instead of clarity. You also never notice if you're being shaped by it. And that's the most effective way of brainwashing. The episode never shows anyone being forced into it. This is not some evil plan from Plankton. He never appears in the episode. They all choose to believe because it feels good to. The more you think about this episode, the darker it gets. The plot is so much more than SpongeBob just being dumb. SpongeBob never meant any harm. He just wants his friends to understand him. He wants them to see what he sees without realizing it's what broke him in the first place. The poor sponge never knew a mere food contamination could also contaminate reality. If you take the comedy away, that's actually pretty disturbing. It's surprisingly easy to give up reality when something feels safe, soft, and familiar. In fact, Cuddle E. Hugs isn't scary because he resembles a monster. He's scary because he's so nice to everyone. And in that sense, this is one of the rare SpongeBob episodes where comfort becomes horror. By the end, it doesn't even matter that Cuddle isn't real. He's real enough to brainwash everyone who believed in him. And once you've seen something like that, you can't unsee it, even when the trip's over. This episode is a good example of how you don't need a conspiracy or a time machine to make reality fall apart. Sometimes all it takes is one idea that feels good enough to believe in. SpongeBob has had its highs, that much is obvious, but sometimes people forget the lows. While everyone argues about the Splinter or Ink Lemonade, there's one episode that quietly crosses the line. One that's not just bad, but also a low point for SpongeBob as a character. An episode where SpongeBob is physically trapped in a ringer, and no one, not Patrick, not the people of Bikini Bottom, not even the writers, seem to care. And after I rewatched it, the problem is clear. The writers clearly forget what kind of story they're telling. And worse, who these characters actually are. So, how did we get here? How did SpongeBob, the most cheerful, can't-be-broken character in Bikini Bottom, end up trapped and blamed for his own suffering? The episode starts off friendly enough, with SpongeBob having a cheerful bath before work, singing about soap, and being a total goof. Until the slapstick chaos. He slips, crashes, and ends up stuck in a ringer, like physically jammed into it. He tries to wiggle out, but no luck, coming in searching for his rubber ducky. SpongeBob asks for help, and Patrick, being Patrick, glues him in permanently because, quote,
Now you're stuck forever!
And SpongeBob, bless him, still tries to be polite about it. But then the first bomb dropped, because this episode isn't about him getting unstuck.
You know what, SquarePants? That's quitter talk. And are you a quitter?
No.
And are you gonna let this ringer get between you and your passion?
Instead of helping SpongeBob unstick himself from the ringer, Patrick just gives him a motivational speech. Like it's a mindset issue, but we know things aren't gonna go well. SpongeBob goes to work, immediately injures Squidward, injures a customer, destroys Krusty Krab's property, causes a whole chain reaction of destruction because, surprise, he's stuck in a ringer, to the point where Mr. Krabs bans him from working and tosses him out of the Krusty Krab only to meet Patrick again. You see, at this point of the episode, most of us would think, see, SpongeBob can't do anything while being stuck. Let's finally address the real problem and try to unstick him. But no, Patrick doesn't give a single shit about that.
Don't you go crying on me. Crying never solves anything.
All he wants is for SpongeBob to stop whining and be positive. In other words, be SpongeBob. Because that's who you are, right? But what follows is just emotional and physical misery disguised as fun. He can't eat ice cream, can't play games, gets a black eye, and gets launched off a carnival ride. Meanwhile, Patrick just keeps dragging him around like a damn pet rock. The emotional low point hits when SpongeBob finally snaps. He yells and tells Patrick he ruined his life.
You ruined my cotton candy.
Good! Maybe now you know how I feel about you ruining my life!
But for some reason, the episode turns on him. The crowd starts gathering, vendors are yelling,
Public fight!
like it's free entertainment. And Patrick plays the hurt feelings card, says he was just trying to help.
It's only trying to help.
Patrick runs off with broken feelings, and then Sandals delivers this insane monologue. Your body isn't the problem, it's your heart. And just like that, SpongeBob becomes the villain. I just don't get it. Patrick is dumb, but even I still get irritated by that. The drama here is so out of place, we are constantly guessing the show's logic, wondering why Patrick's character is so toxic and playing the victim. What makes it worse is that the people of Bikini Bottom are known for being jerks. They love to shame someone and make them feel bad, no matter the reason. They just want all the smoke. And what also follows the story is weird, to say the least. Instead of watching SpongeBob try to fix or cope with his emotions, we follow Patrick's emotions. We get this emotional journey of Patrick that wants to ignore SpongeBob, hate him even. But he just can't stop thinking about him since, well, they're best friends. I guess the idea here is to show off their friendship power. No matter how much hardships or mistakes they make for one another, they will and have always cared about each other. The problem is, the emotion has no weight. We dropped our feelings for Patrick since the first minute of the episode. You can't just put him in an emotional arc now and expect us to feel with him. Not after what he did to SpongeBob. But eventually, Patrick returns, bursts through SpongeBob's front door, and finds SpongeBob soulless on his couch.
My favorite show. Oh, I love that part.
Patrick realizes his mistakes and cries in tears. One tear lands on the glue and, magically, dissolves it. Because apparently the glue is water-soluble? But you're underwater all this time! How? Never mind. I shouldn't question the show's logic, especially when they have a whole episode based on them discovering fire underwater. So they cried together, SpongeBob escapes, they hug, and the moral of the story is, I guess crying solves your problems after all. That's the ending. That's actually a funny line, I'm not gonna lie. But really, SpongeBob goes through all that pain, emotional abuse, and public shame only to get a tear joke? Not even an apology or justice. Just a ringer falling from the sky to trap them again. SpongeBob didn't do anything wrong, and still the show decided to make him the bad guy. That's what makes this episode hit different, and sadly, not in a good way. SpongeBob is being punished for being SpongeBob. SpongeBob is supposed to be the most kind, optimistic, and reliable character. That's been the foundation since season 1. No matter how bad his day gets, no matter how unfair the world is, he will find a way to love his job, forgive his friends, or laugh through the chaos. But stuck in the ringer, the writers take that same resilience and they punish it. As if that was telling us it was his fault for not smiling hard enough. That's a betrayal of who his character is. It's also not funny watching a character built on joy slowly unravel because his entire world, including his best friend, refuses to show him basic kindness. And speaking of best friends, the gut punch on this episode really comes from Patrick. See, Patrick was dumb, but he wasn't cruel. He was a lovable kid, the kind of guy who'd eat a rock thinking it's ice cream or build a sandcastle just to smash it for fun. But this Patrick is a jerk. This Patrick inflicts pain and calls it friendship. He ignores SpongeBob's suffering, gaslights over his feelings, then gets upset when SpongeBob finally snaps, like he's the one who's hurt. And the show backs him up, too. Why? Instead of calling out Patrick's behavior, the narrative punishes SpongeBob for daring to get mad. They turn emotional abuse into a punchline, and toxic friendship into a heartwarming ending. Now, let's be clear. SpongeBob and Patrick have always had a chaotic friendship. That's part of the fun. They make dumb decisions, they blow things up, they live in nonsense. But go back to episodes like the camping episode, or Christmas Who, or Club SpongeBob. When things get serious, when SpongeBob is really in trouble, Patrick shows up. He cares, even if it's just for 11 minutes. But none of that happens here. Sure, you could say that he's admitting to his mistake at the end of the episode, and then he cries, which also solved the problem, but that wasn't intentional. The show never really tells you who's wrong in this case, and the writers treat it like a lesson in friendship. Like the message is, hey, real friends forgive each other no matter what. That's just outrageous. The truth is, this episode doesn't understand SpongeBob and Patrick anymore. They think their bond is built on tolerance, as if SpongeBob's role is to endure Patrick's chaos no matter how far it goes. Because that's what best friends do. But that's not what their friendship was ever about. Their friendship worked because it was mutual. They were dumb with heart. Now, it's dumb with spite. And look, I get it. It's a cartoon. It's supposed to be silly. But when you're dealing with friendships as your core theme, and you turn one character into a sadist and the other into a doormat, what exactly are you telling the audience? That being a good friend means never pushing back? That if someone hurts you but says, I was trying to help, you should just forgive them? It's a betrayal of what made a friendship special in the first place. But you know what makes it so frustrating? It didn't have to be this way. Because I think the setup is not terrible. SpongeBob gets stuck, Patrick tries to help, things spiral. You could build something honest out of that, something chaotic but fun. The ingredient was there, but they refused to cook. SpongeBob and Patrick have been through everything together. Jellyfishing disasters, contesting Neptune, time travel, even wild sea bears. But here's the difference. In the classic episodes, when Patrick messed up, the show knew it was his fault. And when he hurt SpongeBob, there were consequences. Emotional ones, specifically. Go back to Season 2's I'm with Stupid. Patrick pretends to be smarter than SpongeBob to impress his parents, and SpongeBob plays along, acting like a total idiot just to help his best friend feel better. But as the act drags on, Patrick starts enjoying it a little too much. He starts insulting SpongeBob, starts laughing at him with his fake parents. And when SpongeBob finally has enough, when he confronts Patrick in the kitchen, it feels earned. Because the episode properly shows us Patrick crossed a line. Even if he doesn't fully apologize, the story makes it clear who was wrong. Patrick and his parents are beyond dumb, so there's no point blabbering your mouth to make them understand. The emotional logic tracks. And it's funny, with a little bit of cruelty. Now imagine if that energy was in Stuck in the Ringer. Patrick glues SpongeBob by mistake, tries to help, but still messes it up. And later, SpongeBob eventually snaps. But instead of flipping it into a guilt trip, give Patrick a moment of clarity, a realization. Oh no, I was the one being dumb. That's when the feeling comes in. That's where the hug means something. So when they cried together because nothing works, the punchline, I guess crying solves your problems after all, will actually hit. Great SpongeBob episodes let the characters hurt each other in the right way. After all, you can't fake sincerity, not with characters people grew up loving. But Stuck in the Ringer skips that part. It turns the guy who caused the problems into the victim. And the guy who suffered the most was the villain. At the end of the day, Stuck in the Ringer isn't just a worst episode, it's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding of its own characters, of how friendship works, of what made this show mean something to people in the first place. You can be loud, you can be weird, you can be stupid. SpongeBob has always been all of those things, but you can't be heartless. But maybe that's just a running theme with these later episodes. The jokes are always kind of a miss. Whether it's a friendship like this, or legacy, or the way the show treats the characters that built it, modern SpongeBob doesn't always know what to do with the things that made it great. Profanity and SpongeBob are not exactly the combination you think of when you're watching this show. For one, this is a Nickelodeon kids show. Second is that even when someone does curse, they always have a brilliant way to twist it up with some random goofy words to make it sound less aggressive. However, there's one episode that involved so many curse words, they had to censor all of it, to the point that they ended up making the most heavily censored episode of SpongeBob ever. You know which one. There could only be one answer. But funny enough, there's just so much interesting stuff happening behind this episode that it made me think this has to be one of the most clever things they ever pulled off. And for a good reason. So it was closing time at Krusty Krab. SpongeBob was saying goodbye and was about to leave before Mr. Krabs stopped him and said, "Wait, you should take that pile of filth with you."
Oh, Mr. Krabs, you shouldn't talk about Squidward like that.
No, Krabs was talking about the trash bag, obviously. So SpongeBob did it happily. But while he's tossing out the trash bag, he notices some graffiti on the dumpster. You know, those wild and naughty poems kids love to write in your school toilet stalls? Apparently some people in Bikini Bottom love to do that too. He saw many kinds of things written there. From a simple one like Squidward smells, to which SpongeBob adds, smells good because he just does, to some edgy ones like nematodes are people too. There's also a good pun like up with bubbles, down with air, which is actually a survival slogan for divers. Meaning if you find yourself disoriented underwater, you could exhale some bubbles and follow them to find the surface. Which is funny, because SpongeBob is an underwater creature, so the concept doesn't really apply to him. I guess this was the equivalent to us laughing at Dory's slogan, just keep swimming, right? You get the idea, but it's a different world to you, so it was just funny. Anyway, what's important here is the next graffiti that SpongeBob is about to read.
Krabs is,
Now, when I first watched this as a kid, I really thought it was just cheap behind the dolphin sounds. I mean, Krabs is a cheapskate is just true, right? But then why would they censor it? We've seen a lot of times where almost everyone called him cheap. One time, even SpongeBob called him Crustaceous Cheapskate.
Did you crustaceous cheapskate?
Well, my curiosity didn't last long because Patrick came up to say hi. SpongeBob then asked him what the word meant, and Patrick just said, "It's a word enhancer," which didn't really add up to me as a kid. Patrick said you can use it when you want to talk fancy. You just sprinkle it over anything you say and whammo, you've got yourself a spicy sentence sandwich. Which again, still doesn't ring a bell to me. That was until SpongeBob actually tried to say it in a full sentence.
Lovely day we're having, isn't it?
That's when a young me realized, oh, it's something like the F word, right? It's a lovely effing day. Sounds like something an adult would say. And it doesn't take long for SpongeBob and Patrick to like the word too much. They said their mouths felt tingly when saying all those spicy sentences. Needless to say, just like any kids discovering new slang with their friends, they started to say it all the time whenever they felt like they could squeeze in the word.
Today's special is a Krabby Patty served in a greasy sauce.
But of course, the customers didn't like it. They didn't come to Krusty Krab to hear profanity over the speakers while they were eating. I mean, people love Popeyes for their sassy attitude over here, but not to this extent. Especially when you're eating lunch with your kids. So naturally, everyone feels disturbed and leaves. Mr. Krabs rushes from the bathroom after seeing all of his customers gone, and he gives SpongeBob and Patrick an earful. He said the F word is a bad word. In fact, it was one of the 13 bad words you should never use. So Krabs wants them to make a promise to never use the bad words again. Ever. I mean, they're both just innocent kids trying some new slang, not knowing what they actually meant, right? Now that they understand better, surely they won't make that same mistake again. Surely. How well do you think that goes? SpongeBob said it again in the middle of frustration of a ladderboard game. But this time, instead of just kindly reminding SpongeBob, Patrick decided he would snitch to Mr. Krabs. Unfortunately, Patrick got so pumped up in the middle of running, he actually said the bad word himself.
But you said...
Now, both of them are trying to race each other to see who could snitch first. Then, after a heated debate in front of Mr. Krabs, they both just admit that they've said it. Mr. Krabs clearly wasn't happy with how things turned out, so he brings the boys outside for a bit of punishment. Naughty kids should be punished, right? He said the two of them should give the Krusty Krab a fresh paint job from top to bottom, until he hits his own tiny crab legs on a tiny rock. And now the tables have turned, because now both of them have decided they have to snitch to Mama Krabs. However, they actually make a bigger mistake by saying all the forbidden words to Mama Krabs while snitching on Eugene, which is clearly not how you're supposed to talk to an elderly person, kids. Mama Krabs fainted for a bit before quickly standing up again and saying, "You should all be ashamed, and if you're gonna talk like a sailor, you all better work like a sailor too." Then the three of them have to paint Mama Krabs' house as punishment. Needless to say, we were all just waiting for the final punchline here, because Mama Krabs did kick a little rock just like Eugene, and said all the foul words too. Or no, actually, it was just Mr. Jenkins with his jalopy.
Howdy, Mrs. K!
Mama Krabs is a fine lady. She would never talk like a sailor. So it's pretty obvious that this episode did a lot of censoring. They had to put some goofy nautical sound effects to all the foul words so that no kids actually repeated any of what SpongeBob, Patrick, or Mr. Krabs were saying, thus making the episode a good clean lesson for kids all around the world. Right? Well, sadly, it doesn't really work like that. I did mention before that younger me actually got a bit confused from this episode. Thinking back, I'm sure that any kids watching Sailor Mouth understand. This episode is about how we're not supposed to say bad words at all. But what kind of words? If you know anything about kids at all, this kind of story is just going to make us more curious about the words, I'm not going to lie. SpongeBob and Patrick only said the F word, but Mr. Krabs actually managed to say the rest of them in a single sentence. I could make a good guess at some of the words, but 13? I could barely count to 10 at the time. Also, it's not surprising that some parents didn't take this episode too kindly. Some even turned this into a big deal when the episodes first aired. In 2006, a content analysis for children's television made by PTC, or Parents Television Council, suggested that this episode was an implicit attempt to promote and satirize the use of profanity among children. They also quote that this episode features SpongeBob and Patrick using bleeped foul language such as apple, etc. The bleeps are made to sound like a dolphin, which makes the whole thing humorous. They also mentioned this was an example of how levels of profane, sexual, and violent activity have increased in children's television programming, which is, well, they're not wrong. Even I could vouch that I learned 1 or 2 new swear words from this episode after discussing it with some friends. Kids are really tricky. But that's just how learning goes, whether you like it or not. You can't really teach kids what not to do if they don't know what it is. Not to mention, some of the creative team behind this episode said learning a curse word is a classic thing that all kids go through. It was inspired by creative director Derek Dryman's experience of getting in trouble as a child for using the F word in front of his mother. I think that's just the idea here, to give us the perspective of a kid learning the concept of a bad word. Which again is something Hillenburg said many times in his interviews. The idea of early SpongeBob is just to showcase how innocent SpongeBob is, taking it as some sort of a kid trapped in a working man's body. At the end of the day, despite all the contradictions around this episode, they just ended up making something really, really honest and relatable for kids and adults alike, which I think we should applaud them for. They're willing to do something as experimental as this because some parents will complain about it. Because it's not the only time they're willing to do something like this. There's also Hooky and Rockabye Bivalve and some other episodes that walk around controversies as well. Early SpongeBob is OG for a reason, man. They're just fearless. You know, parenting is a complex and hard topic in itself. I'm not going to go too deep into that. What's easy, on the other hand, is talking about all the bad words. So like, the first 2 are F word and ass. But what are the other 11? Well, someone actually posted the uncut version transcript for this episode, but I can't confirm whether it's legit or not, so maybe take it with a little grain of salt. The rest of the words are whew, that's a lot of bad words. Other than that bit of foul language, I also found something interesting. See, years after the episode aired, Tom Kenny actually tells a bit of the story behind this episode in one of his interviews. They had to actually curse in the recording session, because it's just so hard to say the sentence naturally while swapping the bad words for anything else. And coincidentally, I've heard some stories that someone actually uploaded the original recording from the old days. That means an uncut version of this episode with the uncensored cursing does exist, though it's almost guaranteed to never be publicly released. I mean, Nickelodeon or Paramount has to be taking it down. Nowadays, you can find some edited parts of the episode on YouTube, but every single one of them has a different word. So again, take it with a lot of salt. Though we can't really know for sure every single one of those 13 words, at least we know this. Tom Kenny, Bill Fagerbakke, and Clancy Brown had to be having the time of their lives on that recording day for being able to curse their hearts out on a kids show. I just wish I was in the studio that day. It really is an interesting episode to say the least. It's easily the most heavily censored episode of SpongeBob ever because they never do something like this ever again. Man, I wish we got more of those experimental episodes like we did back then, but I'm not complaining.
These are the creepiest SpongeBob episodes ever, and the third one is gone. The episode begins with SpongeBob waking up and realizing that Gary is nowhere to be found, so he comes up with an explanation for his disappearance. He does the same for both Squidward and Patrick, while adding that,
Not everyone is blessed with my natural good looks.
yeah, we'll see about that. Then he goes to work, makes a bunch of Krabby Patties that no one ordered, and returns home to the realization that Gary's missing. Quickly, he runs to Squidward's house, examines his clarinet for temperature by licking it, then swallowing the whole thing. Gross. But the result's the same. Squid's missing too. Dread starts crawling up on him little by little with every empty house he visits, till finally it hits him that everyone's gone. SpongeBob, the nicest person in Bikini Bottom, is all alone, with no friends under the Pacific Ocean. But even then, SpongeBob decides to keep the memory of Bikini Bottom alive by living out everyone's lives for them. So he goes and nails every character's character, from Squidward to Mr. Krabs to Patrick and even Sandy. However, while playing Mrs. Puff, the sudden wave of grief hits him and he bursts into tears. Now, this is a great piece of writing because that's exactly how grief works. So, SpongeBob realizes that he can't live everyone's lives, but that only leads him to an even more depressing conclusion. Immediately, he sees a bunch of blank driver licenses and seizes his only chance to get a driver's license. So he snaps a passport and attaches it to the license, then proceeds to pick a ride. Unfortunately, he ends up picking the one that hates him and names it Bodhi. Who would have thought the boats had lives? Maybe that's why SpongeBob never passes his boat exams. The boats hate him. Anyways, SpongeBob joyrides throughout the city until finally crashing into his bedroom and sleeping off. The next day, he wakes up from a nightmare about the nightmare that is now his life, only to find Bodhi snoring on his bed. That's pretty rude though. So he takes Bodhi to the Krusty Krab, prepares a Krabby Patty, and serves it to Bodhi. But of course, he doesn't like it. He's a boat for Neptune's sake. After this, he returns home and we discover that Bodhi knows about Patty Patrick. See, Patty Patrick is a statue of Patrick made out of 100% Krabby Patty meat in SpongeBob's house. So SpongeBob goes to chat with Patty Patrick, who tells him that Bodhi doesn't like him and is listening to every word they say. But when SpongeBob leaves the chat, he finds himself in what I can only explain as a standoff with Bodhi. Trouble's brewing, and 3 days later, he now fully understands. SpongeBob is not just alone, he's now being hunted by Bodhi and his gang of Bikini Bottom boats. So he runs to the cinema, realizes he's not safe there, and runs out to the streets, stopping only to grab an axe. So SpongeBob is on the streets, losing his mind, as a bus approaches and stops in front of him. Then he strikes it with the axe and voila, every Bikini Bottomite steps out. Turns out there was a National No SpongeBob Day. So the terrible citizens of Bikini Bottom not only neglected SpongeBob, but they made a giant wooden effigy of him, burnt it, and danced on its ashes. Worst still, Patrick, who's supposed to be his best friend, doesn't even seem to care. It's like everyone stabbed him in the back, but they sent his best friend to go twist in the knife. This is really a heartbreaking scene, and SpongeBob is crying. But Mr. Krabs managed to put a positive spin on it all, and of course, SpongeBob believes it, which is good because it prompts dumb Patrick to ask for his own No Patrick Day, and he gets it. This is one episode that gives you chills like no other. In fact, it made one Redditor post, "I wonder who hates SpongeBob more, Squidward or the show's writers." The intro starts with SpongeBob getting forced out of sleep and into the day by his alarm clock. Then it brings alive on TV one of our deepest fears, the fear of being alone. Then we get to see SpongeBob deal with grief like we all do and overcome it. The whole atmosphere of the episode is so suspenseful and thrilling while keeping that fun and comical aspect of the show that we all enjoy. You get to see the entire Bikini Bottom population play a cruel joke on SpongeBob because of a probably made-up holiday, then Patrick getting what he literally asked for, thus bringing it all together. We see SpongeBob maintain his optimism even in the face of tragedy, for a while, before insanity starts to creep in, then returning to his fun self. From the quiet atmosphere to the creepiness of seeing SpongeBob being hunted by boats, it all just keeps you gripped on the edge of your seat, laughing and getting inspired. And that crazy plot twist that there was a National No SpongeBob Day that SpongeBob never knew about in all his 20 plus years in Bikini Bottom, that's just crazy. The second creepiest episode is Squidward in Clarinet Land, and it starts off with the unusual event of a happy Squidward going to work at the Krusty Krab. This unusual happiness stems from his upcoming clarinet recital, but then it seems Bikini Bottom has conspired to make him unhappy. So, from getting door slammed to being punched by the morning breath of a fish, Squid remained unmoved. His clarinet was safe and nothing could touch it, not even a drop. Poor Squidward explodes and decides to take the law into his hands. No, I mean literally, he took the labor laws and approached his greedy boss like most of us wished we would, demanding for a place to keep his stuff. And yeah, I looked it up, we don't have such laws here. Sorry. So Mr. Krabs reluctantly agrees, disappears, and reappears with something that looks like a death trap until SpongeBob cleans it, and finally Squidward has a place to keep his clarinet. His happiness returns, but doesn't last. Later, SpongeBob goes somewhere that I assume is his home and returns with loads of tools to reconstruct the locker. So he completely transforms the locker and moves Squidward's clarinet to this drawer. So, Squidward returns to his desk, satisfied again, but he's soon forced to return when SpongeBob continues with the locker renovations. Now, his clarinet has been relocated to... Then, the next time he sees his clarinet, it's with SpongeBob, who's running away with it. He gives chase right into a weird section with a small hole that leads to a stage. He sees a curtain there, pulls it, and finds himself in a strange world that I guess is Clarinet Land. Filled with wonder, he steps inside, sees his clarinet standing on the floor before it magically disappears into SpongeBob's hands. Then he chases SpongeBob again until suddenly a giant eagle appears, knocking Squidward to the ground. The eagle introduces himself as... Oh, sorry, the place is Hornet's Forest, not Clarinet Land. So Squidward informs the eagle that he's looking for his clarinet, which sounded ignorant to the eagle because apparently you can't own a clarinet. How weird is that? Well, it's not as weird as an eagle swallowing Squidward just to teach him some respect. Gross. Now, Squidward sliding down into what I guess is the eagle's belly. Then he sees SpongeBob running toward the intestine, I guess. Look, I don't know much about eagle anatomy, but Squidward climbs over some kind of hill and jumps at SpongeBob. They both fall, but only Squidward lands in a strange mirror room. This room has a chair and 2 mirrors on both sides, where 2 other squids swallow their clarinet and start playing right into original Squidward's ear. Then we see Squid on the run. Oh no, he's chasing SpongeBob while they're both running on a clarinet. Then they both fall into the clarinet. Next thing we know, Squid's blown out of the clarinet into something like a SpongeBob-themed pinball machine. Turns out that it's a giant Patrick playing the game and winning, but instead of getting a coin, his reward is Squidward. Finally, Squidward gets the chance to ask the question on everyone's mind. Giant Patrick answers him with, "It must be all the pressure, huh?" Hold up, I think that explains this entire episode, but I'll get into that later. For now, Giant Patrick runs away because of some noise, and seconds later, Squidward gets swallowed by a vacuum cleaner that eventually explodes and shoots both SpongeBob and Squidward into space. Now, it's a space chase, and Squidward catches SpongeBob only for him to appear back in Mr. Krabs' locker alone, tired, mystified, and even liquefied. Okay, I think the madness is over now. Just then, Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob walk into the room, and right after Mr. Krabs narrates his fraudulent activities, SpongeBob walks over to Squidward and asks if he's okay. Turns out, SpongeBob had the clarinet on him the entire time, which just drives Squidward insane. So he snatches his clarinet, throws SpongeBob in the locker, chains it up, and throws the whole thing into a bus headed for far, far away. Satisfied, Squidward ends his workday and goes to the clarinet recital. Now he's ready to perform, but as he opens his clarinet box, he finds SpongeBob in there again. This time, he just runs away. Whew, such a tragic tale, and who would have thought that SpongeBob could be such a menace? But what's really going on here, and why does it all seem like a fever dream? Well, I think it's because it is. I think Squidward feared he would perform poorly at the recital because SpongeBob didn't let him prepare well, and so he hid this fear under the mask of happiness. I'm sure most of us can relate to this, and if you can't, you should hear that Eminem song titled Lose Yourself.
His palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy.
And that's what Squidward did. He lost himself the first time he went to the locker and did not find his clarinet. But he did not actually chase SpongeBob. He simply crept out and lay on the floor helpless and stuck in the fever dream. That's this episode. Basically, I think this episode makes it clear that as long as SpongeBob lives, Squidward will probably never succeed with his clarinet, and that's just tragic. And finally, the creepiest SpongeBob episode of all time is aptly named I Had an Accident, and it starts off with Patrick having an accident and dying. Okay, that only happened in a game he was playing while actually sandboarding with SpongeBob and Sandy. But he still suffers a brutal accident, he just doesn't die. So Sandy came up with this great idea. At first, SpongeBob agrees to listen to the mountain, but he soon gets caught up showboating. I mean, this is a guy that can't even pass his boating lessons, and he's showing off. Anyways, he suffered his own accident, shattering his butt, and it would take 20 hours plus lots of stapling and some glue to reassemble SpongeBob's butt. And don't forget that SpongeBob's a...
You're a lucky, 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 lucky luck boy.
But even with all that luck, the doctor warns him that his next fall might be his last, and from then on, he would be using an iron butt. So a scared SpongeBob goes on a round-the-clock butt patrol as the whole Bikini Bottom conspires to destroy his butt. First, we see a fish who SpongeBob mistakes for Diddy, then he had to reject taking part in a 7-mile spanking machine. And what's Squidward doing participating in such a game anyway? Well, SpongeBob has had enough. I mean, he's not even in Hollywood, and yet his butt is not safe anymore. So he decides to embark on a permanent personal lockdown, one that Sandy and Patrick tried to prevent. But SpongeBob has made up his mind that...
Listen, I told you that I'm never leaving my house again.
Never ever?
Never, ever, ever.
Never, never, ever, ever for never ever?
Never, ever, never, never, ever, ever, never.
After an iconic back and forth, and SpongeBob being smart enough to find a way to continue working as a fry cook, but not enough to figure out how to get the food he normally eats, he asks his new friend Chip to show them to the door. So once again, SpongeBob relegates himself to playing with inanimate objects, but Sandy is determined to find a way to get her friend out of the house. The first trick was jellyfishing, which not only failed, but SpongeBob already improvised with dust collecting. Next, they got him a cake and asked that he come out to blow out a candle underwater. Don't overthink it, it's just cartoon logic. After another failed plan, Sandy decides to throw everything she's got into getting SpongeBob outside the house, but everything fails. Finally, they decide to exploit his savior complex, with Sandy telling Patrick to wear a gorilla suit and pretend to attack her so that SpongeBob will have to come out and save her. Unfortunately, Patrick puts on the same gorilla suit he wore for Halloween, which exposes their plan. But then the show's writers had their own plans too by introducing another Patrick. See, it turns out that while Patrick wore his gorilla suit, another Patrick that wasn't even Patrick at all was putting on a Patrick suit. What the heck? It's a live-action gorilla? Just so you know, we made a pretty dope video that explains what was really happening in this episode, so you should watch that after this. Anyways, both Sandy and Patrick were in real trouble, forcing SpongeBob to consult his inanimate friends, and thanks to Chip, our boy takes a leap of faith and steps out of the house. Great. But next thing we know, he gets attacked by a piece of paper. Then something really weird happens. Why does it seem like Squidward isn't aware of what's going on? Anyway, SpongeBob starts celebrating the end of his personal lockdown, but it's a bit too early as the gorilla grabs him and literally tore him in two. Wait, is this still even a kids show? Well, that question is secondary to this one. At this, everything begins to unravel as this creepy gorilla calls out for a George, who's a horse, or is that a zebra? Anyway, George shows up and they ride away into the sunset. The end? Oh no, there's this live-action family that's as confused as we are about everything that has happened, so they turn off the TV. Now, it's the end. For real. There are so many theories trying to explain what was really happening in that episode, but here's the fact. We've just witnessed SpongeBob overcome his fear of being outside, a fear that's very much part of the human experience. So yeah, even an episode as creepy as this can't take.
There's something off about modern SpongeBob. Not just the animation, but something way deeper is missing. The early seasons had weird jokes, sure, but they also had moments. Moments of stillness, of awkward silence, of real, honest character. And that noise and chaos used to mean something. We remember these episodes so vividly not because they were loud, but because they lingered. But now, we get episodes like this.
I hope you enjoy your meal.
Episodes that feel like they're written mid-Sugar Rush. Characters bounce around, yell louder, get tortured longer. We rarely get something emotionally touching anymore these days. And yet, we get episodes like Ink Lemonade, one of the saddest episodes of modern SpongeBob, and not in a good way. Because it's not sad in a heartfelt, touching sense, it's sad because it's heartbreaking to see what this show has become. Because what did they do to Squidward here? It just feels wrong. It makes you pause and think, man, this is just sad. But let's rewatch the episode for a bit. The episode starts simple enough. Patrick's opening a lemonade stand. Except he's not selling lemonade, he's just selling water. Warm, suspicious-looking, unflavored tap water. Not even iced. Then Squidward walks in, just taking out the trash when he stumbles into Patrick's business model. He tries to reason with them. This isn't lemonade. You need lemons to make lemonade. But Patrick, being the post-season 5 version of Patrick, genuinely doesn't know that. I'm not even surprised. So Squidward throws his rotten lemon into Patrick's face as a kind gesture, which is fair. That's still more vitamin C than any of those customers were going to get anyway. That bruise gave me an uneasy feeling. I feel like this episode is going to have lots of weird visual. What the heck is that? That was just gross. I don't know why they put that there. But you know what's even crazier? Patrick actually has the audacity to peel a used wax strip from his armpit, press it against the rotten lemon, and serve it to customers. Naturally, he's throwing up once he knows the plaster comes up from Patrick's armpit. I don't blame you, man. I want to throw up too just by seeing it. Oh, and guess where he vomits? Squidward's house. Of course, always Squidward's house. Always his floor. So Squidward storms out to confront him again, and that's when the real nightmare begins. Because SpongeBob pops out of nowhere and scares Squidward so bad that he squirts ink right into a jug. But instead of being horrified, SpongeBob tastes it and says,
That's delicious.
"Excuse me? I don't know why you were willing to drink that. I know humans have been consuming Squid's ink since a long time ago, but these characters are not humans. The ink is literally your neighbor's body fluid. It's the equivalent of us drinking someone's snore." I'm not gonna say it. That's just gross. But somehow, the people of Bikini Bottom love it. They start lining up around the block for this new flavor, black lemonade. So now, Patrick and SpongeBob decide to mass produce it. But how? Squidward only squirts ink when he's scared. Which, if you know squid biology, kinda makes sense. It's their defense mechanism. But also, it sets up the real horror of the episode. First, Patrick shows his internal organs to Squidward as if it was a casual afternoon, then bringing in a massive spider, which Squidward hates. Poor Squidward had to get tortured over and over again so Patrick and SpongeBob could sell more black lemonade to people. And because it's SpongeBob, it doesn't stop there. The line isn't getting any shorter, so Patrick goes for the biggest scares. He sets up a whole haunted house attraction to traumatize Squidward for good. From a haunted tablecloth to a creepy starfish baby with a big nose, they even make Squidward confront the nightmare of his own aging. Like, come on, this isn't slapstick, this is psychological warfare. At the end, he even manages to squirt out a whole boat of ink, which is kind of impressive. But also, are we not going to talk about the physics of this? How much fluid can one squid even hold? He's not a water park, he's a cashier. Eventually, Squidward catches on to their scheme. He found out that they were both selling his body fluids as refreshment drinks, but instead of calling it gross and telling them to stop, he decided to open up his own stall, selling people black lemonade straight from the source. And in true Squidward fashion, it all goes wrong.
Make with my black lemonade.
He pushes himself too far, his body gives out, and he ends up blasting ink all over the customers. Of course, people aren't pleased with it, since now they found out that it's his body juice that they drank. They go wild, and all end up puking in Squidward's home again. Because why not? The episode ends up with Patrick and SpongeBob telling Squidward that they've stopped with selling black lemonade and are moving on to selling homemade cookies from spider eggs. And that's it. 10 minutes of body fluids, infection, internal organs, and complete public humiliation. All wrapped up in cheerful background music. But here's the thing. You might think that this is just a gross-out comedy episode, just another Squidward gets wrecked story, because if you've been watching this show long enough, you know it didn't used to be like this. So why does this episode feel so wrong? And what does it say about how far this show and Squidward have fallen? There's a moment right after Squidward blasts ink all over the crowd where poor Squidward just stands there, soaked, exhausted, and humiliated. No one helps him, not SpongeBob, not Patrick, not a single person in the crowd. They're too busy puking and complaining. That moment sticks with me because it's the kind of silence that doesn't feel funny. It feels like defeat. And this is where the sadness really hits. Because on paper, Squid Ink is just more wacky shenanigans. Patrick and SpongeBob start a business, Squidward gets dragged into it, and then chaos ensues. But in practice, it's just mean. They discover Squidward squirts ink when he's scared, so they build an entire business around exploiting that, without his consent. They don't even try to talk Squidward into joining the business. They just scare him non-stop, all so they could make a profit. That's a fate worse than industrial cows. Even the spider is giving them consent to use its eggs as a cookie. How is it you're treating the spider better than Squidward? And when he finally gives in, when he tries to join the system and make it work for him, the world shuts him down. The same people who lined up to drink his suffering are now vomiting in his house. Again. Now compare that to an older episode, like Can You Spare a Dime? That's another Squidward suffers episode, sure. Squidward loses his job because of his own antics and ends up homeless. But SpongeBob, for all his flaws, tries to help. He gives him shelter, food, even emotional support. Yes, the episode turns into a joke about Squidward's laziness, but there's still a thread of humanity there. A sense that SpongeBob cares, even when it's inconvenient. But in Squid Ink, there's none of that. And honestly, the amount of fear they put Squidward through in 10 minutes is kinda disturbing. This isn't some wacky side plot. Fear is the plot. That's what really makes this episode hit differently. Squidward doesn't just get hurt, he gets dehumanized. There's no empathy, no recognition, no moment where anyone stops and realizes they went too far. SpongeBob and Patrick end the episode smiling, casually moving on to their next gross-out business, spider egg cookies, like nothing happened. Meanwhile, Squidward is left to clean up the mess, alone, again. This episode is a perfect example of the tonal shift that's haunted this show for years. It's louder, it's meaner, and emptier than ever. You don't laugh, you just sigh and say, man, this is just sad. So maybe that's the real heartbreak here. Not that Squidward suffered, it's that no one cares anymore, not even the writers. Even the town's puke says more than the script does. It didn't have to be this way, but it did. And we're just left here watching Squidward drown in his own ink while the world around him laughs. When someone says, oh, I hate this modern episode so much, you can usually tell why people hate it. Maybe Squidward suffers, maybe SpongeBob and Patrick act brain dead, sometimes logic gets thrown right out the window. I mean, we're just so used to it by now, it's getting kinda tiring. But then I remember another infamously hated episode called Sports from season 10. An episode where, technically, Squidward isn't the only one getting tortured. But I can guarantee you, that doesn't make it any better. If anything, it only makes it way weirder. Because unlike Plain to See or Squid Baby, this one doesn't even pretend to be normal. And by the time you reach the ending, you're not even mad. You're just confused by a question that makes the title card feel weirdly accurate. How did something this simple get this messy? The episode throws us straight into chaos from the get-go. SpongeBob drags a trash can outside, with Patrick inside of it, of course, and a mail truck yeets a package straight onto his lawn. It's addressed to Sandy. So naturally, SpongeBob and Patrick do what any good friends would do. They rip it open and crawl inside like raccoons. Unsurprisingly, this is when we hit problem number 1, and it's a big one. They don't recognize sports equipment.
What does this stuff do?
Golf club? Bowling ball? Catcher's mitt? It's like they've never seen any of these objects in their life, which is straight up weird, because this town literally had some kind of Olympics at the Fry Cook Games in Season 2. There's also Larry's gym and a volleyball court at Goo Lagoon. We see that in Ripped Pants. But now, a golf club is a book grabber, a bowling ball is a whipped cream bowl, and a catcher's mitt is a portable snail bed. It's honestly impressive how hard you have to work to forget all that. Anyway, they eventually make their way to Squidward, who is in the middle of cooking food worthy of a king.
But this is a meal fit for a king.
Which means, obviously, it's about to get destroyed. A tennis ball comes through the window, ruining his whole meal. Squidward storms out to yell at the neighbors. But this part in the episode gives us a really unexpected conversation, even for modern episode standards.
What's sports?
Sports are games you play for points. The points determine the winner of the game.
They're just brain dead about this. So SpongeBob and Patrick very enthusiastically ask Squidward to teach them about this sports thingy, which leads to this episode's second fatal mistake. Squidward figures he'll torture them back by teaching them the wrong kind of sports.
That's right. You should teach him to play wrong. Let him have it, right between the eyes.
Squidward decides it's the perfect time for payback, after 9 seasons worth of torture. So he blindfolds them, hands them horseshoes, and watches them beat the absolute barnacle out of each other. And listen, the idea of Squidward getting payback could be interesting, if only the entire energy of the scene wasn't villain monologue from a Saw movie. I mean, he just sits there in a chair smiling while SpongeBob and Patrick are beating each other. But the most ironic thing about this scene is that they think they're doing great.
Pain is worth points. You know the phrase, no pain, no gain.
From that sentence alone, we already know the plot can only escalate into more pain. Only pain, to be exact. Every scene after is just pain happening with different kinds of sports equipment. Ice skating on sand? Pain. Slicing SpongeBob in half? Pain. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, a crowd gathers in a stadium. I swear, Bikini Bottom citizens smell violence like sharks smell blood. A father and son see them from a side road, and the dad says, "Don't worry, son, we're sports fans. We just watch." Watch what exactly? Because none of this is actually sports. Unless by sports you mean 2 grown men hitting themselves in the face with random objects, while Squidward keeps score like a Roman emperor. But you know what? The crowd loves it anyway. At this point, this is just a sport gladiator, right? Actually calling it outright gladiator would have been better, less confusion at least. But again, just when you think things can't get any stranger, the fog machines turn on, trumpets play, and Squidward is carried out in a full Grim Reaper outfit to become the rule giver. And the crowd cheers for him, which raises a bigger question. Does anyone in Bikini Bottom know what a sport is? Because the father said they're sports fans, and yet, what kind of games are they playing? Heck, I don't even think there's any rules in this event. So yeah, I think the audience isn't confused, they're really just enjoying the violence. But finally, Sandy arrives to fix everything. Or, well, not really. After seeing SpongeBob and Patrick beaten to a pulp, Sandy thinks it's only right to make things even, by beating the crap out of Squidward.
Y'all want to see a game? Fine. Squidward, I challenge you to a game.
Yeah, she decides to just join in and try to beat Squidward in his own game. To her credit, it's entertaining, and probably deserved since he's torturing the two of them for entertainment, but she's basically doing the thing she's calling out Squidward for. And the crowd? Of course, they eat it up. Then we get this whole montage of Sandy bullying Squidward in front of the crowd, including his mother.
Check!
And after stomping Squidward 98-0, the final resolution we get from Sandy is declaring SpongeBob and Patrick both winners, with a warm group hug and Squidward's head exploding. Cool. So, after all that chaos, violence, and screaming, you're left sitting there asking the same question SpongeBob and Patrick asked at the start. What is sports? I don't know about you guys, but throughout my first watch, I kept asking myself, where are we going with this? What exactly is this episode trying to do? When we reach the end, it doesn't feel anything like sports-themed comedy. More like an experiment that nobody thought through. I mean, let's start with the obvious. The plot makes no sense. The entire plot hinges on SpongeBob and Patrick not knowing what sports equipment is, or anything about sports at all. Which would be fine if they hadn't already spent an entire episode competing in Olympic-level events, in fry cook games, and some beach episodes, like Ripped Pants, and the fact that SpongeBob has a built-in home gym. We see that in Help Wanted. SpongeBob also does karate with Sandy sometimes. Even catching jellyfish could be considered as some kind of sport, right? We all consider fishing a sport. I mean, it has some competition in it. But in sports, they're suddenly confused by a soccer ball and a golf club. It's not even funny stupid. It feels like the writers needed a shortcut for a sports-themed plot, and this was the easiest one. And get this, once the foundation makes no sense, everything else starts wobbling too, because Squidward's revenge is just lazy. Like I said, for years we all joked about Squidward should get his revenge once in a while, it's only fair. But this episode doesn't explore that idea. Squidward's just chilling, telling them to hurt each other, and they just obey him. What is with that? Can't you just make something like Fools in April? Squidward does plan his revenge there and sets up a whole ride of shame for SpongeBob. At least it's something. Even Squidward himself feels off this time. He isn't witty, sarcastic, or creative at all. He's just a psychopath for the sake of plot convenience. Which leads us to the most painful part of this episode. The fact that the whole town craves violence. Out of nowhere, an entire crowd shows up as if they've been waiting their whole lives to watch someone get concussed with a horseshoe. Did they really think, yeah, let's have the whole town encourage child-friendly torture? Kids will love that. Actually, the kids in this town do love to watch someone getting tortured. They cheered when SpongeBob got beaten and forced to eat lima beans, so I guess they got their bloodthirst from their parents. It's also a letdown when Sandy shows up because I genuinely think there's gonna be some kind of resolution. I stupidly think, finally, now we're gonna have some meaningful conversation. But no, she's just here to add more violence. She challenges Squidward, beats him senseless across multiple sports, and the crowd, again, roars in approval. That's why after 10 minutes of painful games, the ending doesn't mean anything. Sandy declares everyone a winner, hugs all around, and Squidward's head explodes. Nobody learns any lessons from these shenanigans. Heck, nobody even learns what a sport actually is. But one of the strangest things I found when researching about sports is that this episode reveals something bigger about us as fans. Yes, some people hate this episode for the reasons I've just talked about, but there's also another side of the internet that genuinely celebrates it. You get comments like, slapstick, karma, Sandy beating Squidward, what's not to love? Or, Patrick deserved it, so this was satisfying. And even, Squidward is awful, he deserves every broken bone. After reading these, you can't help but wonder, do people actually enjoy the violence? Or is this just sarcasm? Or are they so used to violence, something like this isn't even surprising anymore? I guess some episodes are just so bad, they change the audience's expectation of what SpongeBob should be. It's just kinda sad. It's empty enough that people can read anything into it. Vengeance, karma, justice, catharsis. Even when the episode itself doesn't know what it's trying to say. See, if sports was your first SpongeBob Sports episode, you might just shrug and go, it's just chaos, whatever. But I think one of the big reasons everyone hated this episode is because SpongeBob already perfected this exact premise over 20 years ago, in one of the most beloved classics ever made, the Fry Cook Games from Season 2. Now, don't get me wrong, the Fry Cook Games aren't logical either. Fast food restaurants competing in the Olympics to prove who's the superior fry cook? That's glorious nonsense. But it doesn't matter, because the episode knew how to sell the idea. It gives us a good lead for what to expect. Right from the start, the episode tells you what the premise is. Oh, they're doing the Olympics, but with food. And instantly, the jokes write themselves. Throwing a big straw instead of a javelin, using fruit jelly instead of a trampoline, the clean and jerk with a whole barrel of pickles. Every event is a ridiculous, creative twist on a real sport. I bet the writers had a blast creating these bits. But the secret ingredient wasn't even the sports. It's the old rivalry between the Krusty Krab and the Chum Bucket. Those two have been competing in this event for years, and now it's their employees that have to carry the torch. You genuinely want to know what's going to happen and who's going to win. All you gotta do is put in some realistic fish to hype up the viewers. And while we're on this subject, yes, this episode is full of painful, disgusting gags too. In fact, a lot of them. And of course, we get the iconic yellow versus pink rivalry, only to end on this legendary twist. It's the perfect and most memorable finale. And okay, technically, the underwater color thing wasn't intentional.
You know, these were white when I bought them.
But that's part of the charm. However, the most important thing is, through all the chaos, you felt like you were watching something understandable. Meanwhile, Sports looks at all of that and goes, nope, let's do none of that. They even wiped the show's memory to force a lazy setup. I think it's not an exaggeration to say that Sports is way more than just a messy episode. It shows how far the show strayed from the formula it once executed perfectly. But at least that makes the title card somewhat make sense, right? Maybe they intentionally put the question mark there, because the teams themselves didn't really know what this episode was even about, and they wanted us to feel the same. For that, the episode deserves a lot of hate. In the end, Sports doesn't leave us much to have feelings about. I mean, it's just an empty plot with a lot of violence. It forgets that chaos is only fun when you care about the characters that are caught in it. And it shows how easy it is for the show to forget why we cared about these characters in the first place. If SpongeBob had a real series finale, how would it go? That question has been on my mind for a long time now. Whenever people talk about SpongeBob's real ending, the obvious answer is the 2004 movie. That was the stopping point the original team had in mind before the show just kept going. So then I started thinking differently. Did they ever do something like that again? Like an episode from the regular show, something that could serve as the finale for the journey. And that's where I found this weird little special called Goodbye Krabby Patty. Honestly, it might be the strongest contender. Because the first time I watched it, I got this weird, specific feeling, like running into a childhood friend after many years. And you still recognize the voice, yet so many things have changed, you barely recognize the person. It really does feel like watching an epilogue. Well, the episode somehow turns that very feeling into something crazier. Before any of the corporate stuff kicks in, this episode opens in the most aggressively wholesome way possible. SpongeBob and Patrick are just doing their thing, jellyfishing, brushing their teeth in public, slipping into one giant pair of pants together, all kinds of fun stuff. The episode quietly reminds you what their friendship always looked like: stupid, simple, and absurd. Then they stumble into Bargain Mart and head straight for the freezer aisle, because SpongeBob wants to top off this whole day with the perfect end to a perfect day, which are just fancy words for buying ice cream. And right there, SpongeBob drops this little line that foreshadows the episode and tempts fate.
Rocky road, unlike our friendship, which is a smooth avenue and will never have any bumps.
Mr. Krabs is also here, shopping for some frozen food for dinner. SpongeBob then slides over and goes, "Can you imagine if they had frozen Krabby Patties at the supermarket? Then everyone in the world could enjoy them." And boy, does that sound like capitalism for Mr. Krabs. Suddenly, he's shooting a commercial for his new product, Frozen Krabby Patty, which they would later bring to a business executive named Don Grouper. Don basically says the commercial is garbage, but the product idea is gold. So if Krabs lets professionals handle it, it would be perfect. Then we get the pitch meeting, and it's just corporate brain rot in its purest form. Then comes the first real shift. They need a regular guy as the face of the brand. Someone with a face that says, I love Krabby Patties. And of course, the only obvious choice is Patrick. Which is perfect because Patrick has the exact emotional range of a billboard. And I don't mean that as an insult. That is literally his job description here. It doesn't take long for Patrick to get swallowed by the corporate machine. He shoots commercials, becomes famous overnight, he has to do mall appearances, he's even got a manager now. But of course, the Don isn't stopping here. He tells Krabs he could make way more money if only he would change the formula. Krabs doesn't even blink. He just goes, it's funny, but it's also the first time you realize the plot is so much more than Krabs being cheap. This is a whole machine that doesn't even see people. It only sees demographics. So before SpongeBob could make any arguments, the Don distracts them with a factory tour where the factory is pumping out patties at insane speed, and SpongeBob notices a barrel labeled sand. He asks about it, and Krabs hits him with the most criminal line in the episode.
Well, it's imported. It's spelled sand, but it's pronounced fiddler.
That's it. That's the first red flag in this story, because now you know where it's going. Inside the factory, they're doing a taste test, and the tester says, yeah, it tastes kind of bad. But the executives don't care, because the whole point is convenience. And then the episode introduces the unhinged side effect of the new frozen patty. People's butts start inflating after eating them. Like, oh no, our product makes your body weird. Anyway, ship it. And just in case it's not obvious enough, it's a throwaway joke from that Squidward hips on Just One Bite, except this time, it's your butt. From there, the episode speedruns all the consequences. The very next day, SpongeBob goes back to work, expecting the Krusty Krab to still be the Krusty Krab that he knows. But Mr. Krabs already has a whole new plan prepared for him. He drags SpongeBob out and reveals the new Krusty Krab. Now it's been converted into a museum, with animatronic versions of the characters acting out the classic SpongeBob routine like it's an attraction. And Krabs tells him his new job is basically give tours, sell souvenirs, and point people to the freezer to buy the frozen patties. SpongeBob's face says everything. Like, he didn't just lose a job, he lost the thing that makes him SpongeBob. Make one real patty, remind Patrick what real tastes like, and use Patrick's celebrity status to blow the whole thing up from the inside. Patrick, however, is already tired. He's sick of the cameras, sick of the schedule, sick of being treated like a product. He finally kicks everyone out and admits he wants his old life back. Basically tackles him with friendship and shoves the fresh patty into his mouth before Patrick can refuse. And instantly, Patrick lights up like he just remembered who he was. Now the goal shifts. Beyond just saving their friendship, they have to save the reputation of the Krabby Patty before the whole world accepts the sand version as normal. So we cut to the shareholder event, where Krabs and Don are doing their victory lap, hyping the meteoric success, and they bring Patrick on stage to say a few words. Patrick hesitates, looks at SpongeBob, and then drops the one sentence that detonates the entire business.
It's made with sand!
Krabs faints immediately. Don doesn't even pretend to care anymore. He just bails. Then the episode turns the sand thing into a full public panic. People watching the news, vomiting sand, their inflated butts shrinking back down, frozen patties getting trashed, and the factory getting shut down and dragged away. Krabs hits rock bottom in the alley and says he's ruined. But that's when he looks through the window and sees something he hasn't seen in a while. Customers eating fresh patties and actually enjoying them. He walks back in, sees the robots being tossed out, sees SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick, and realizes they pulled the Krusty Krab back from the brink. Of course, Krabs immediately turns it back into business. Minimum wage, merciless labor, and he's the boss again. And that's how the episode ends. Krusty Krab back, friendship restored, and Krabs learning absolutely nothing. Except what the patties are supposed to taste like. Now, here's why I think this special works as a finale contender, even though it never tries to be one. Because the real finale needs one thing: it has to mess with the core premise of the show. SpongeBob, for most of its life, runs on a very specific loop, with Conch Street or the Krusty Krab as home base. SpongeBob, for most of its life, runs on a very specific loop, with Conch Street or the Krusty Krab as home base. SpongeBob cooks religiously, Squidward complains, Patrick does his own stuff.
I don't understand the question.
Krabs counts pennies, and Plankton shows up once in a while to steal the formula. And Goodbye Krabby Patty is one of the rare times the show actually dares to break that loop. When Krabs said that line,
You've made your last Krabby Patty.
that's such a weird sentence to hear in SpongeBob because making Krabby Patties is basically SpongeBob's entire identity. If you take that away, what's left? Just a square dude with a funny hat. And then it gets worse. The Krusty Krab doesn't just change a little, it becomes a museum, a gift shop, a place where the real Krusty Krab is basically a memory you can only visit now. It's the part that hits me the most personally, because that's exactly what happens when something you love changed or grew until it's only recognizable as a memory. It's also really touching to see every bit of these characters' outcomes in the story. Patrick becomes the real star, just like his name, but that also takes away from his relationship with everyone else. Krabs is more than just being cheap now. He's willing to take his business to a way bigger scale to rake in the money he's always wanted. Even though Krabs didn't have an emotional resolution for his character, at least he learned that a small business with heart lasts longer and is more sustainable than a greedy corporate business model. And even he can't pretend the frozen version is the real thing. He's literally chewing it while trying to convince himself. But of course, the hardest punch in the story comes from our guy Squidward. He finally gets the chance to chase the dream life he's been whining about for at least 17 years.
Too long have I toiled under your iron claw. Now I am free.
And then comes crawling back, devastated, with this line,
Really, you need more than 17 years behind a cash register to be qualified for dreams.
that's way too real. So the episode pulls off this really specific nightmare. Everything still works, but none of it feels like yours anymore. You're only reciting the good old days instead of living them, like SpongeBob. What was once a best friend is now only a title, the relationship with Patrick. Chasing a dream becomes, yeah, nice try, like Squidward. And your second home becomes something you visit instead of something you live in, the Krusty Krab. That's finale material. And what growing up feels like, if you ask me. It's forcing every character, including us, to confront a what now moment. Then the episode does that one thing that seals it for me. It ends with a regular loop again.
Now get to work!
And yes, the town getting dump truck ass cheeks as a side effect is insane. Like, congratulations, you invented the first fast food that doubles as a cosmetic procedure. But SpongeBob doesn't need to defeat Don Grouper with a master plan. He doesn't sue anyone, he just needs everyone to know the truth. The formula also isn't sacred anymore. It's sold in the gift shop, and it's blank. I instantly think of that dragon scroll that Po opens up in Kung Fu Panda. I don't know why. Yeah, maybe the actual secret ingredient is love after all, both for the patties and for the show itself. And once he starts cooking fresh again, everything slowly goes back to normal. But now it feels earned, because you actually saw what it looks like when the regular habit is gone. It makes you feel grateful even. Reminds you how often we take these things for granted in real life. And for an episode that's basically about convenience and frozen food, that's a pretty wild way to accidentally sound like a last message. Coincidentally, this was their 200th episode. And what do they choose to tell their big milestone story about? A corporate team shows up, says the Krabby Patty is like an old friend, but they're also saying old is gross. Yeah, that's basically every brand you've ever loved getting a modernization, where they sand off the unique parts until it's smooth enough to sell in bulk. And if we wanted to play Connect the Dots even further, this special came from season 9B, just when Hillenburg came back to become the advisor for the show. Hillenburg himself talked about wanting to step away after the movie era because he didn't want the series to jump the shark, and he liked the idea of stopping before people got tired of it. That doesn't mean he wrote this episode specifically, it's credited to Kyle McCulloch. But I think it does explain why this theme lands so cleanly with the SpongeBob should have ended earlier conversation. The episode is basically dramatizing that exact fear. What happens when something handmade turns into something mass-produced? But then the irony is, they don't even blame the corporations first. They blame the sweetest little guy in the room. The idea starts with SpongeBob going, "Wouldn't it be nice if everyone could have this at home?" That's such a normal thought. That's literally how every innovation starts. Then 2 scenes later, the whole town is vomiting sand and growing their fake asses. So yeah, the episode is basically asking a gross question in a funny way. What do you accidentally ruin to make it for everyone? I think the answer's pretty clear. So, if the 2004 movie is the obvious ending, this episode feels like an alternate ending in some sense. I mean, I could see this plot made into a movie. It's about what happens when the real thing gets replaced by a version that's easier to sell, easier to scale, easier to microwave, and slowly stops tasting like itself. I think that's why the museum idea hits so hard. Which is kind of the most SpongeBob moral ever, honestly. Even since the early days, SpongeBob loves to slip in disturbing visuals. Sometimes it's just a hyper-realistic close-up. Sometimes it's an outright abomination. And every once in a while, they also make some horror episodes to creep kids out, like Scaredy Pants, where they expose SpongeBob's brain, or a Graveyard Shift, where they tell a ghost story about the hash-slinging slasher. But funny enough, out of everything they've done, the first episode that really disturbed me for good as a kid is not one with gross visuals. It's also not one of those Halloween specials. And yet, it disturbed me so much, I couldn't stop thinking about it for a whole day the first time I watched Squid's Visit. The weird little episode starts at the Krusty Krab, near the end of the shift. Squidward is just chilling and reading some art magazine before Mr. Krabs walks in to make some small talk with him. Nothing weird here. It's normal for your coworker or your boss to ask about your plans after work, right? Especially when the shift is slow. You gotta make conversation to make it less boring. Except, SpongeBob asks about it too. I mean, did SpongeBob and Krabs plan something after work? Did they plan to grab a drink or fish clams again? What's this all about? It definitely feels like they're talking about something we don't know. But Squidward's definitely not the type that spends time or grabs a meal with his coworkers after a shift, not to mention with SpongeBob. Then SpongeBob basically said, "Yeah, me too, just hanging around La Casa de Sponge," which obviously means his home. As soon as the shift is done, Squidward doesn't waste any time leaving the Krusty Krab, with SpongeBob following him. SpongeBob says he didn't explain it properly earlier. He just wants Squidward to visit his house. A normal neighbor visit. Friendly, simple. But again, Squidward's response is exactly what you would expect, and that should be the end of it. Except it's not. In the next scene, SpongeBob cries while begging Squidward to visit his home. He said it's been a really long time. He can't even remember the last time Squidward came over. Now, that's weird, because we've seen Squidward at SpongeBob's house repeatedly in the past. Sometimes it's even for something other than a visit. But whatever, maybe this episode happened before all that, who knows? All I'm trying to say is that the setup for this episode feels really off. Anyways, it gets worse from here. SpongeBob insists that Squidward visit his home, so he clings to Squidward's legs, or tentacles, so tightly, and then follows him everywhere. To the bus stop, to the laundromat, grocery shopping, all the way to Squidward's lonely dinner, and back home again. Even the next day at work, SpongeBob keeps asking the same question until Squidward finally snaps. At this point, SpongeBob realizes there's no way to convince Squidward no matter how much he cries or begs. So he goes to the best person to ask for advice, Patrick. SpongeBob asks, "Hey, does Squidward ever visit your home, Patrick?" And Patrick says that Squidward did once, but only to take back some stuff he had previously borrowed. Which is also not true because Squidward did have a party there once.
Borrow something, then he'll have to come over to get it back.
That's actually good advice from Patrick. Because yeah, that's the easiest way to have someone like Squidward come to your home. And here I remember thinking, oh yeah, so this episode is going to be SpongeBob making the craziest problem up to borrow stuff from Squidward and failing repeatedly in the process. Because Squidward will say anything to refuse it, right? But no, this episode gives us way more than just that. In the next scene, we see Squidward at home cooking a casserole. And while he adds in some pepper, he gets startled by some loud thumps, drops the pepper bottle on top of his plants, and ends up getting some pepper on his imported rug. The sound is coming from SpongeBob's house, because he's in the middle of some big renovation. So Squidward reaches for his vacuum cleaner, and it's gone. All that's left is a note from SpongeBob. So SpongeBob didn't borrow it, he stole it. Well, maybe because he knew he wouldn't get it by asking nicely. But stealing is not cool, SpongeBob. Not at all. And somehow, it only gets worse. Because when Squidward calls him to get an explanation, SpongeBob is way too excited. He basically says, "Yeah, come here to get it," while breathing heavily on the window. It's pretty clear that SpongeBob is planning something. And we'll get to see what soon enough. The second Squidward steps inside SpongeBob's house, the real disturbing part reveals itself. SpongeBob is already renovating his home to match Squidward's, like making an exact replica of the interior. I mean, it would be really uncomfortable to see someone copy the exact version of your home, because that means he's been in your house repeatedly, often enough to get all the details and crazy enough to put in all the effort to replicate it. Stuff that only a psychopath or a stalker would do. And SpongeBob is really trying to make Squidward stay, doing whatever it takes. He tells Squidward to relax on the couch, offers him some snacks, tortures Squidward with a rash cream. Everything except giving Squidward the vacuum cleaner. So Squidward does what any sane person would do. Search for the vacuum cleaner himself and get out of this psychopath's house quickly before SpongeBob can do anything. Oh, and also because Squidward has his casserole in the oven, he only has 20 minutes before the casserole is burnt. Unfortunately, the more Squidward explores the space, the more disturbing things are revealed. Squidward starts to spiral here, and honestly, me too. Because why would you do something like this? Why would you go this far only for someone from next door to come to your place? And before Squidward lets himself spiral any further, he grabs his vacuum from the cabinet and goes home. With some torture montages, of course. Only to find his home has been burned to the ground. Because it turns out he left his house for more than 20 minutes and his casserole caught fire. Poor Squidward. SpongeBob doesn't feel guilty about any of this, but at least he offers Squidward a place to stay while his house is being repaired. And Squidward answers with one of the weirdest responses I've ever seen in this show. Like, what was that even supposed to mean? Fancy dinner with his vacuum cleaner eating the burnt casserole? What? And then the episode ends with Squidward sleeping in SpongeBob's house while SpongeBob himself sleeps in the rubble of the tiki hut. Yeah, at least he deserved that. And that's the episode. So yeah, that's Squid's visit. And if you're still thinking, okay, but why was this the one that disturbed you? See, when I was a kid, I didn't really have the words for what's happening here. I just knew it felt wrong. Like, it's supposed to be a goofy, friendly visit, but it doesn't feel friendly, to say the least. Only years later, it makes perfect sense why this episode was stuck in my head all day. Because for the first time, it destroyed my image of SpongeBob. As I said earlier, I had this weird feeling since the beginning of the episode. Because the way Krabs and SpongeBob ask about Squidward's plans, it sounds like they already talked about something and now they're trying to invite him in. But nope, Krabs just makes awkward small talk, while SpongeBob, on the other hand, does have a real plan. And the more the episode goes on, the clearer it gets that this is more than just SpongeBob being friendly. He goes way too far to renovate his house, steals the vacuum, he's breathing like a maniac on the phone, like, why are you so excited? But the strangest part is, why does SpongeBob want Squidward to visit so bad? I mean, he could just want to get close to Squidward, and yet when Squidward does visit him, he barely spends any time talking or doing anything with Squidward. Think about it. The only real conversation he has with Squidward is this.
You've made an exact replica.
After that, he leaves Squidward to sit alone on the couch, and when Squidward wanders around the home, SpongeBob isn't even with him. Shouldn't you follow Squidward and explain your efforts to replicate his house, if you want him to appreciate it? Then the plot shifts to Squidward discovering the clues one by one, realizing SpongeBob knows every single detail about his home. It's like slowly realizing your weird neighbor is a stalker or a serial killer this whole time. Yeah, it does feel like that halfway through the episode. You know how it goes. Someone insists on inviting you to their home, then leaves you alone while saying, I'm gonna grab something real quick. Then you roam around the quiet house realizing he has way too many suspicious things there, and right when you're about to connect the dots, he attacks you from behind. Which coincidentally is also why some people hated this episode. Some people pointed out that they hate the way SpongeBob acts really creepy here. So much so that one person made a whole creepypasta about a Squid's Visit alternate ending, where, spoiler alert, Squidward discovers that SpongeBob has been trapping other people this way to be his friends forever. And I'm not gonna lie, it works as a creepypasta. The episode already feels like it's halfway there. Other than that, I think the confusion also comes from the mixed feelings this episode gives us. This episode is horror at its core, but it just refuses to admit it. Because imagine if they leaned into horror on purpose. Squidward visits SpongeBob's home, then slowly spirals because he keeps finding more and more clues about SpongeBob being an actual serial killer, only to prove it's just a stupid misunderstanding. It would still be a disturbing episode, but at least it'd be fun. So yeah, that's the one big reason this episode feels disturbing. But I think the biggest part that makes me uncomfortable is that this doesn't feel like the SpongeBob that I used to know. I mean, I grew up watching the early seasons of SpongeBob religiously, as you all might expect. And back then, SpongeBob was chaotic. Rock bottom, Alaskan bullworm, fry cook games, all that kind of chaos. I get this impression of SpongeBob as an unapologetically himself friend who would do anything for fun, but still understood what mattered. He was intense for sure, but not to the point of being creepy. And then we get Squid's visit. And it feels like I'm watching an old friend I once trusted, acting like someone I don't even recognize. He's just a psychopath weirdo now. So yeah, Squid's visit disturbed me as a kid, and not in a fun way. I just realized maybe this episode is what inspired SpongeBob to borrow Squidward's cable cutter so he would come to the party.
My cable's out.
Oh, sorry to hear about that.
Yeah, this episode definitely happened before season 3 then. I don't know, man. All this timeline stuff really confuses me. It's kind of crazy looking back because SpongeBob has so many episodes that are abnormal in bigger, louder, more obvious ways, but they didn't really disturb me. For years, nobody really understood this one episode. It's confusing, it's stupid, and doesn't make any sense. It's an episode that truly thinks outside the box. Yeah, I'm talking about that one. When this episode aired, nobody really understood how the box works. We all had our guesses, the internet had theories, some kids even tried building their own imagination boxes. It's all fun games, until recently, Nickelodeon decided to change it. Not just the rules of the box, but the sense of the episode. So Season 3 Idiot Box is a perfect example on how to make an episode revolve around such simple stuff. The episode starts off simple. SpongeBob and Patrick are standing on the streets waiting for a mail delivery. A big delivery, to be precise.
That's a big box.
But they don't care about the stuff inside at all. They take the TV out of the box, then toss it straight into the garbage like it's the packaging, just so the two of them could play with the empty box. Now, obviously, Squidward gets annoyed about it, questioning their stupid actions like usual. But according to both of them, who needs a television when you have
imagination?
So they set out on the imaginary climbing adventure inside the box. Now, a lot of us watching this for the first time thought, this is just a stupid kid's game, right? We all do it when we're kids. And that's exactly what the writers wanted you to think. They wanted you to question their logic. Because even though there's nothing in the box, they actually sound like they're having an adventure inside the box. We all could hear metal clanking, sounds of them stepping on the snow. Even when Squidward kicked the box, it affected them. Then comes the dramatic dialogue, the despair, the classic cut off my legs moment. But when Squidward opens the box, there's nothing. Nothing except two idiots sitting there. Squidward insists on knowing the tricks. How could they make all the sound effects, the scene? But again, their only answer is
imagination.
Well, Squidward's really furious now because he can't hold the fact that both of them could enjoy their imagination stuff and he doesn't. When clearly Squidward is the most artistic person in the neighborhood. So throughout the episode, we saw Squidward try to figure out how they're doing it and keep interfering with them again and again, hoping to catch the tricks. He tries to sit in a box himself. Doesn't work. He also asks to join them, out of desperation. But inside the box, he sees nothing except this.
Beep, beep, beep.
Arr.
Boop, 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 boop.
Ahoy, matey.
Beep, beep.
So, as the last effort, Squidward decides to just wait till late night, hoping to find some secret when they're asleep. Only to get carried like garbage. That's the whole story. Now, looking back again after all these years, this episode was magical. Not because of what you saw, but because of what you didn't. SpongeBob and Patrick never show us their adventures. There's no visual cutaways, no fantasy sequences, nothing. It's all just sound effects, great acting, and your own imagination filling in the blanks. Which, when you think about it, is kind of genius. The entire premise of the episode hinges on you not being in on it. Squidward doesn't get it, you don't get it, everything doesn't make sense. And that's what makes it so funny. It's such a dumb plot, but it works. because you're left constantly asking, wait, how are they doing this? And SpongeBob just keeps giving the same answer: imagination. It's frustrating, but also kind of mind-boggling. Like, yeah, okay, that's not how imagination works. You can't just sit in a box and make helicopter sounds. But also, maybe you can. This episode is the very reason for me as a kid to go dig through my garage and find a box big enough to crawl into. Because some part of me believed something weird and awesome might happen. That's the kind of episode Idiot Box is. But then, 22 years later, Nickelodeon did the unthinkable. They made Squidiot Box in season 14. Yes, I'm not joking. They made a sequel for Idiot Box, and guess what? They made sense of it, but not in a good way. Squidiot Box opens with straight nostalgia. SpongeBob rummaging through stuff in his attic. He's digging through old junk, Gary's baby shell, some trash, some sea urchins, and found the old imagination box from the previous episode.
Oh boy, it's time for imagination.
Only this time, the box doesn't work. SpongeBob and Patrick try to start the engine, but nothing happens. So they decided that they need professionals. Yes, you heard that right. Professionals, as in someone that understands the logic behind this box. And wouldn't you know it, there's a place called Imagination Box Repair. So this box is a technology then? Like a machine? And not some kind of magic witchcraft portal like Narnia? Damn, this ruined my childhood. It's a machine with parts and a guy who fixes it. There are terms like inspiration motor. There are models for this kind of box. SpongeBob's got an older type called double corrugated 3600, which makes sense since he got the box over 20 years ago. They asked the mechanic guy to fix it, but he couldn't do it. He said that the gasket was blown or something, I don't know. And since they don't make the spare parts anymore, he offers them another model called a cushion fort. I don't know what's happening anymore. SpongeBob is not interested. Said he's more of a cardboard man, whatever that means. So they decided to just go back home and tossed away the box. But then, the magic happens. Not for SpongeBob or Patrick, for Squidward. He trips, gets inside the box, and turns it on.
You must have jostled something and fixed it.
The imagination motor working, and from here, the episode goes wild. Squidward gets sucked into an adventure inside the box. Except this time, we see everything. We get to see how the logic behind the imagination box works in real time. In short, the box works like a dream. You just need to imagine it, and then it will happen immediately. Need a flashlight? Just imagine it. Need to move places? Just imagine it. We follow Squidward's bizarre adventure from here on. He goes to a wild tropical jungle with lots of dangerous animals inside it. Unfortunately, Squidward just can't stop imagining bad things, simply because SpongeBob and Patrick dictates it. Every time they mention it, Squidward just makes it happen and gets tortured by it. Because of course, it's modern SpongeBob, right? Scary sea snakes, clothes-eating clams, sea panthers, a jazz club, you name it. Oh yeah, and that too. They never forgot to torture Squidward's toes. They also managed to bring Doodlebob to the imagination box, which is quite funny actually. In the end, Squidward finally manages to get out by drawing an escape door with his body ink. This episode is leaning hard on nostalgia, huh? But the real twist comes at the end. Squidward gets out of the box and decides to go where imaginations die, Krusty Krab. Because after a long day of wild imagination, nothing feels better than the enjoyment from your weary, boring minimum wage job.
The good old boring Krusty Krab.
But turns out, he never really escapes the box. He's just imagining it. The end. I'm not gonna lie, the episode is kind of fun to watch. Aside from the torturing Squidward part, which I clearly hate, everything is pretty solid. But it also completely breaks the original logic. Instead of mystery, now everything is laid out. You imagine something and it appears. That's the joke now. After watching this episode, I realize now that this box finally makes sense, and I don't like it. That's kind of ironic, isn't it? The box actually makes sense now? We get a full look at how it works, what powers it, what goes wrong, and what happens when Squidward finally taps into it. And look, it's cool seeing Doodlebob again. The jungle bits are creative, and that final twist is low-key brilliant. On its own, the episode is actually enjoyable to watch, especially in the drought seasons of modern SpongeBob. But apparently, this episode got absolutely cooked by fans, for various reasons. Some said this episode just feels slow. Some said that this episode is just nostalgia bait. Though, weirdly enough, I don't fully agree. It's not bad, it's just misplaced. It's a fun modern SpongeBob episode trying to cosplay as a classic, but I also kinda understand why they hated it. It's not really a great sequel, especially when you end up ruining the first one.
Remember, you can imagine anything.
As I said before, that was always the beauty of Idiot Box, the fact that it didn't make sense. You had to fill in the blanks, and you were left wondering. The whole joke was about being outside the box. The box isn't even a magical thing now, it's just a technology. Runs by an overheating imagination engine. This feels like getting amazed by a magic trick as a kid, and now once you know the trick, it's kind of like, oh, that's all it was? It's not that special after all. The magic's gone. And what makes this sequel even more ironic is that Squidward finally gets imagination, and he hates it. This is the guy who complained he didn't get to play pretend with SpongeBob and Patrick in the first one. And now that he's the only one who can use the box, he spends the whole time screaming from sea snakes, jazz gone wrong, bubble tornadoes, and Doodle Bob committing assault. Poor Squiddy. That part specifically is what's hurting me the most. If you've been following this channel for quite some time, you do know that I hate how modern SpongeBob keeps picking on Squidward. You have to understand, Squidward was left out of the joke. That's the key to the comedy. In Idiot Box, Squidward becomes the stand-in for the rational adult brain. He's the grown-up man, too skeptical, too logical for dumb fun. And the show knows that. They try telling us, hey, you forgot how to have fun with your imagination. He keeps trying to find the trick, the wires, the speaker, the sound effects machine, but there's nothing. Because the box only works if you stop trying to figure it out. Meanwhile, the sequel tortures Squidward for the exact opposite reason. He's getting tortured because he can't stop imagining things. This isn't the box of imagination, this is the box of disappointment. Because who needs a TV when we have our writers to torture Squidward for 11 minutes straight, right? I'm not gonna lie. This episode leaves a sour taste in my mouth. On one hand, Squidiot Box is fun. I'll give them that. The animation is solid, lots of cameos and throwback nostalgia jokes. The plot was also kind of good, especially the ending. But at the same time, I wish I never watched the episode. The downside of making a direct sequel to such a goated episode like Idiot Box is that you will walk in the shadow of it. People are going to compare it to the original episode and expect it to have the same kind of quality to it, if not better. But this episode is not even close to that, especially when you're also ruining the charm of the first one. You can't recreate a mystery by explaining it. You can't make a joke funnier by over-explaining the punchline. And you definitely can't top Idiot Box, an episode that worked precisely because it didn't make sense. They just did the exact opposite of what the original did. And if there's anything Squidiot Box really taught us, it's that not making sense was never the problem. It was the magic.
At some point in Season 9, SpongeBob aired an episode that almost nobody remembers. It's not really a shamelessly, disastrously bad episode. It's just a forgettable 11 minutes that came and went without leaving much of a mark. And honestly, I kinda get why it got forgotten. However, there's something really bugging me ever since this episode aired. Somewhere inside that episode is an idea the show had been sitting on for 9 whole seasons, without ever actually using. And the fact that they finally tried it and didn't manage to get the most out of it, now no one really talks about it. But that's exactly why we're here to talk about the episode called The Fishbowl. To understand why this episode matters, or why it should matter, you have to understand Sandy's whole deal is that she's a squirrel from Texas, working on her glass tree dome, and pretty much doing scientific field work underwater. And the show does use her in her scientific nature every now and then. We've got episodes like Sandy's Rocket, where they go as far as circling the moon and end up capturing everyone in the city with a fishnet, or maybe Chimps Ahoy, where Sandy's chimp bosses demand her new invention because they have to get something in return for their investment, right? What the show almost never does is give her an episode that's actually about underwater research. You know, about what it means to be a land mammal living underwater and studying it. Because, I mean, everything she does before, like building a rocket or inventing a banana peeler machine, that could be done above the water. You don't need to go all the way down there to do that. We do have some episodes that got close to that kind of plot, like Pressure, which is about Sandy and the boys arguing over who's better, land creatures or sea creatures. It touches on the idea of this underwater comparison study, but it's really just a competition and gaslighting episode at heart. The closest the show has ever came to actually getting to Sandy's purpose is a season 9 episode that most people have completely forgotten existed. And I think the reason most people have forgotten it says more about the episode itself on so many different levels. The episode I'm talking about is The Fishbowl. And before you go, wait, I think I remember that one, let me just say, you probably don't. Not really. So one day, Sandy gets a book in the mail, and it's a book about behavioral psychology, the study of how living things act and why. And Sandy, who has apparently never encountered this particular branch of science before, is obsessed.
I've studied underwater chemistry, geology, and astronomy, but I've never studied underwater people!
Which is a little weird already, because Sandy is a multidisciplinary scientist. The idea that behavioral psychology is somehow a new frontier for her is a stretch, but fine. New book, new interest, I'll let it go. And so, in order to know more about this behavioral study, she tries to observe the fish of Bikini Bottom. She tries to study on a public bus first, by just sitting there and commentating about people out loud while everyone's minding their own business. So, of course, it's just about time for them to throw her off the bus. Then she finds SpongeBob and Patrick and asks if she can study them, which they agree to immediately. However, the moment Sandy turns on her recorder, they freeze completely stiff, which is actually a real thing, by the way. When people know they're being observed, they change how they behave for that very reason. It's called the observer effect, or in social science, the Hawthorne effect. Basically, the subjects will stop acting like themselves because they're too busy doing what they think acting like themselves is supposed to look like. Coincidentally, Sandy's book also explains this to her, so she decides to go covert and study them in secret. Creepy. And Sandy's plan is to just tell them to get a bucket of white and black sand each from the beach, and while they're away, she sets up hidden cameras and microphones all around SpongeBob's house, which hardly looks like a secret to me. Now, here's where it gets interesting. She tells them to count every grain of each sand in the bucket, and while they're at it, she tells Patrick he's in charge. Just, you're in charge now for whatever reason. And Patrick immediately abuses it. He starts thinking really hard about what being in charge is really about. He makes SpongeBob do things his way, and keeps changing the method, just because something doesn't feel right. When Sandy offers them the same amount of ice cream with different bowl sizes, Patrick can't stop fixating on which one is bigger. He keeps switching and eventually just takes both because, you know, he's in charge. By the third experiment, Patrick has fully descended because now Sandy gives them 2 cones of ice cream and Patrick just straight away takes it. And so he told SpongeBob if he wants his shares of ice cream, SpongeBob has to rub his nasty feet. He also makes SpongeBob count both sands while knocking over SpongeBob's sand bucket, so he has to start the whole count over. It's as if he wants to make sure SpongeBob can't get his own share of ice cream, whatever it takes. Now, here's the thing. What Sandy accidentally just recreated is the Stanford prison experiment. Yeah, the Stanford prison experiment was a study done in 1971, where ordinary people were randomly split into guards and prisoners in a simulated prison setting. Within days, the guards kids became genuinely cruel. And not because they were bad people before the study started, just because they were handed authority. Apparently, that was enough for us humans to commit heinous things. In the end, the whole thing had to be shut down early because of how fast it unraveled. Just like what happened here at SpongeBob's home. So that means the episode knows this is what it's referencing. The Stanford prison experiment is literally listed in the episode's trivia. It's right there, but for some reason, the execution of this episode never commits to it. The episode ends with everyone getting ice cream, except for Squidward, who somehow gets himself dragged into all of this. A resolution that doesn't really earn anything, and about Squidward crying inside a cage for reasons I'll get to in a second. But let me come back to something, because there's a detail in this episode I need to talk more about first. The title, The Fishbowl. In English, to live in a fishbowl means to live under constant public scrutiny, which means no privacy or no space to just exist without someone watching. The episode's title card uses a fisheye lens distortion effect, and at the very end, Sandy tears off the exterior of SpongeBob's pineapple to reveal it was a cage the entire time, an enclosure she built around them without them knowing. They were practically in Sandy's fishbowl, which means this episode quietly set up something actually kind of elegant, even if the episode doesn't really point it out. But then, as interesting as those subtle themes are, the episode doesn't really make anything genuinely fun out of it. Here is my actual frustration. And I want to be fair here, because I think the people who made this episode were clearly trying something. The bones are good. But the thing with bad episodes, they still get talked about all over the place. One course meal is infamous. A pal for Gary gets brought up constantly because, well, they generate heat. On the other hand, the fishbowl isn't bad in that way. The premise about Sandy finally doing what she came to Bikini Bottom to do. The concept of observer effect, power and cruelty, the effects of studying your friends without their knowledge is genuinely rich material. The title has a double meaning that could have been the entire spine of the episode. And then most of the runtime is Patrick being mean to SpongeBob and Squidward not getting ice cream. Why? Why does this episode exist if not to explore this idea? SpongeBob has done weirder and darker and more conceptually ambitious things than a behavioral psychology study. SB-129 is a strange view on loneliness and time paradox in a kid's cartoon. Rock Bottom is basically existential horror. The show was never afraid of going somewhere unexpected. My best guess, and I could be completely wrong about this, is that nobody in the writer's room figured out how to make behavioral science funny in the way SpongeBob requires things to be. Everything that happened in this episode is just SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward's daily routine. If you see Rule of Dumb or I'm with Stupid, you'd know that Patrick will abuse his authority in any way he sees fit. That's not new. SpongeBob is also just being a people pleaser and too afraid to take things to an extreme before everything falls apart, like he did in Overbooked or maybe even Stanley SquarePants to some extent. And of course, Squidward getting tortured is just mandatory in this show. Everything in this episode will happen anyway, even without Sandy doing any kind of experiment. It feels so indifferent to the point you even forget what this whole experiment is about in the first place. Also, if you're Sandy, who has already been hanging out with these guys for over a few years, you would know this already. It's not a surprise. Not to mention, I think someone like Sandy could definitely think of a smarter way to carry out this experiment. Like, to not make everything this obvious, but whatever. I get it that the Stanford prison experiment is not inherently comedic, that's for sure. The observer effect doesn't have a natural punchline, so they grab the easy way out to make a gag. Patrick goes power mad. SpongeBob and Squidward suffer. Done, which ironically left the actual premise sitting on the table. Sandy came to Bikini Bottom to study life under the sea.
Older lumpy-looking female subject, obviously a mother, hates daughter.
Excuse me.
This episode came to a premise to explore it. Both of them stood right in front of something genuinely interesting, and somehow missed it. If I try to maybe sort of fix the plot here, I think you could make SpongeBob as the one going mad over the authority here, because that would give the thought of even underneath this yellow people-pleaser sponge, he could still abuse power when you give it unconditionally. Or maybe try to incorporate Squidward more in this story. Like, make sure he realized that it was an experiment by Sandy right away, and then make him as the one who's trying to point out how stupid and radical this whole thing is, and talk both of them out of it. But no, he's even too stupid to recognize that it was Sandy disguised as the ice cream guy. Like, come on, Squidward. I kinda expected this whole episode would be as interesting as To Save a Squirrel at the very least, or better when I first watched it, because that was one of the more weird episodes with more serious topics and lessons this show has ever touched, and they definitely executed that episode better than this one. You could get from this story about how even two goofy and cheerful people could turn into their predatorial nature when the situation puts them in a eat or be eaten kind of situation. But I already covered that episode in one of my videos, so you could just watch it to know the full story with it. I started this video by wanting to answer one question. Why does nobody talk about the fishbowl? And I think the answer is, it gave people nothing to grab onto. It's not quotable, it's not shocking, it didn't break a character in a way that generates years of discourse. It aired, sat in the season 9 pile, and got scrolled past. And yet, there's something worth sitting with here that goes beyond just this one episode. Sandy has been one of the few characters who has a more interesting reason to be in Bikini Bottom, and the closest the show ever got to exploring what that actually means was one 11-minute episode that most of the fandom can't even remember airing. I personally would really love it if they're going with more episodes about Sandy trying to understand more about life underwater, but maybe it's just me. Maybe that's the real story. Not that the fishbowl was forgotten in the first place, but that what it was trying to do was always going to be forgotten. Because the show never really utilized its full potential, which means the idea of Sandy's research was always going to be background detail, flavor, something to reference without ever sitting with. And that's kind of the thing about this show.
The modern seasons of SpongeBob are perfect for hate watching. I mean, how can you not, man? Some are gross, some are mean, some are just confusing enough to make you pause the episode and go, wait, what did I just watch? I've done a few episodes covering those messes, and wouldn't you know it, the writers just can't stop with it. This right here might be the most humiliating thing this show has ever done to Squidward. And that's saying something. Because when you've been turned into a snail, milked dry, and mentally broken by a clarinet recital, you'd think there's not much lower to go. But somehow, SpongeBob found it. And by the end of this video, we're not just counting how many times Squidward gets bashed in the head. We're figuring out why it might just be the most hated SpongeBob episode ever made. The episode starts with Squidward's therapy session. He's taking a bubble bath, enjoying the essential oils, and listening to some weirdly specific meditation radio. He's just having a nice time, which in SpongeBob language means he's about to get ruined in the next few seconds. Right on cue, SpongeBob and Patrick ruin the Zen experience with their laughs. Turns out, SpongeBob found a box of old baby toys in his attic, so naturally, instead of throwing them away like a normal adult, he and Patrick are outside acting like toddlers on a sugar high. They're giggling, sucking on pacifiers, riding scooters, and generally doing whatever it takes to make Squidward fume. Squidward instantly snaps, storms outside, and slips on one of the toys. He crashes into a mailbox and smashes the back of his head, and the plot goes downhill right away. Squidward's head swells from the concussion, and now he can't do anything besides moan in pain. They rush him to the hospital where the doctor gives him the most made-up diagnosis I've ever heard.
Your friend has a condition known by the medical term of head-go-boom-boom-itis.
Also, we get the only piece of tension this episode bothers to set up. The doctor said Squidward can't take another hit to the head, and if he does, he could stay like this forever. So, clearly what this means is 11 straight minutes of Squidward living through a life-ending concussion. Saying Squidward's head can't take any more hits in the modern season, that'll just jinx it, man. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna put a counter on the bottom here just to see how many times Squidward gets hit in the head. One from the mailboxes, a few mini bumps when they're trying to take him to the hospital. So we've got 7 in the first 3 minutes. Which brings us back to the next phase, the babysitting arc. SpongeBob and Patrick take him home and start playing Mommy and Daddy, which sounds cute until you realize Squidward is not really there. Patrick starts the day by throwing Squidward up to the ceiling. SpongeBob then scolds him, saying we need to protect his head, remember? And then slams the mini table into his face. After that, they try feeding him krill tartare, which, by the way, sounds more like something Squilliam would eat, but Squidward just throws a tantrum and throws it in SpongeBob's face. Then, it's game time, because the baby has to play, right? They teach him the Kelpie cake toss, and Squidward slaps them across the room.
This game's kind of dangerous.
You know, at this point, I thought maybe this won't be so bad. Maybe instead of torturing Squidward, it could just be about SpongeBob and Patrick getting burned out from trying to protect him. But now, Squidward crawls out the door and immediately heads out onto the road, right in front of a sleeping truck driver. Patrick saves the day by lifting an entire slab of road like it's nothing. Nice, right? Except the road lands squarely on Squidward's head. And of course, the truck has to land on Squidward's house. So much for the hope. Now Squidward is crying nonstop and the montage begins. Yeah, it's Rockabye Bivalve all over again. But no, Patrick actually steps up this time. He's the one watching baby Squidward while SpongeBob sleeps. They take turns in taking baths, they eat while he cries, 72 hours of non-stop babysitting. Somehow, this is the most realistic part of the episode. But then, just as our hope builds up, we hit the breaking point, the Krusty Krab segment. SpongeBob and Patrick drag Squidward to work. Why? I don't know. Patrick doesn't even work at the Krusty Krab. Can't he just watch Squidward at home while SpongeBob clocks in? SpongeBob then explains that Squidward can't perform his crusty duty. Greedy Krabs takes one look at his drooling diapered cashier and says, I don't care if he has seaweed for brains, he needs to be behind that register. We all know this is not gonna end well. So SpongeBob duct tapes Squidward to a chair, puts a Krusty Krab hat on his head, and acts like a proud dad on his son's first day at school. He gave baby Squidward a pencil and notepad to take orders, but of course, baby Squidward could only scribble nonsense, eat a customer's head, drool into the register, and make everyone in the restaurant very, very uncomfortable, including us. Then comes the final straw. Squidward has a diaper emergency in public. Did they have to show us that? Customers obviously gag. Mr. Krabs flips out and yells at baby Squidward. Krabs is clearly losing his mind now. I mean, what do you expect from yelling at a baby? SpongeBob tries to take the responsibility and change the diaper. In the dining area. Yes, on the table. On the floor, next to the ketchup, and finally in the cashier boat. But Krabs just won't let him, saying he can't do that in front of the customers. Do it in the back where the food is prepared. Apparently, no one in this episode thinks bathrooms exist. Then, since all the customers leave in disgust, Krabs finally snaps and tells SpongeBob to get the poopy baby out of his restaurant. SpongeBob, now suddenly emotional, says, if my poopy baby isn't welcome here, then I'm not staying either. I mean, you brought him here. You're the one showing his full diaper to everyone. Anyway, just as he's about to go, he slips on a rattle and slams Squidward's head into a frying pan, the ice machine, and several kitchen appliances in a row. And just like that, covered by stacks of ice cubes, he's cured. The swelling goes down, his voice returns, his brain went back to normal. And he looks around like he just woke up from a coma.
Sorry, Squidward, I was gonna change you, but I got interrupted.
Stop! Not another word about this.
That's the end of the episode. Let's just say it out loud. The episode is bad. Just straight up, brainless, how did this get approved? Bad. Squidward takes 24 hits to the head. He's practically disabled, caged, duct-taped, diapered, force-fed, and paraded in public like a brainless mascot. The writers did way more than just cross a line here. They launched themselves over it in a diaper holding a rattle. But the irony is that the violence isn't even the worst part, not even close. Because once you take a closer look, you start to realize something about this episode. Like it's trying to get away with something. And when we dig into how this story works, what it chooses to show, what it doesn't show, and how the characters act like this is all fine, that's when things get really uncomfortable. It's not hard to guess why people hate this episode, right? There's just so much uncomfortable stuff happening all at once. I'm not even sure where to start. For one, it's like everyone is deliberately pretending not to notice how insane this is. Mr. Krabs sees a brain-damaged man in a diaper and says, "Yeah, put him on cashier duty." Customers watch this go down and act mildly annoyed at best. Nobody, not one character, ever asks, "Wait, is this okay? Should we not do this?" Everyone's just fully committed to the bit, no matter how far it goes. Now, old SpongeBob had weird episodes with babies too, but at least back then, someone tried to act like a human being, or, well, a fish with a conscience. In Rockabye Bivalve, SpongeBob and Patrick didn't take their weird fake marriage seriously, but they still treated the baby like it mattered. In Goo Goo Gas, the chaos was indeed surreal, but it was only a plot device for Plankton. The episode was still about Plankton trying to steal the Krabby Patty formula. The baby stuff was just a distraction. Even then, the baby still manages to win over Plankton. That gives it some justice. But Squid Baby? It's just Squidward getting humiliated, injured, and reduced to a punchline for 11 straight minutes. No one ever calls it out. The episode runs on one rule. If Squidward suffers, it's funny. And by the time we're watching diaper jokes in a restaurant, duct tape at the register, and head trauma number 24, I'm not even sure if the writers wanted us to laugh or just sit there in disbelief. I mean, there's just so much you could do to a man trapped in an infant body. Speaking of Squid Baby, who in their office approved this design? It's just uncomfortable to look at. Why does his head bloat so much? Is this just another case of a gross-out visual gag? You did manage to gross me out after all. Maybe it's just the head go boom boomitis. I mean, the itis suffix does technically mean inflammation in medical terms, so maybe? I guess that also explains why a bag of ice cubes magically fixes everything. It feels like the whole design was meant to be unsettling, but not in a clever way. Just gross for the sake of being gross. And now we get to the part that really makes people uncomfortable. Because if you've looked around online, you'll see a lot of people refer to this episode as the writer's poorly disguised fetish. Now look, I'm not here to accuse anyone of anything. I have no proof of intent. But I am pointing out that when you put an adult character in a diaper, make him drool and babble, change his diapers in public, zoom in on his mess, and have everyone go along with it like it's normal, that hits some nerves. And not the good kind. Because there are entire communities online built around forced regression, adult baby play, infantilization. All the stuff this episode plays with, intentionally or not. Even if that wasn't the intent, it feels like it's crossing into that territory. It's just there. And it leaves us asking, what exactly was this episode for? And the weirdest part? There might be no real answer. Of course, I don't exactly know the reason why all of this is happening, nor that the team behind it ever actually said anything about it. But if I had to guess, I'd say a lot of it comes down to when this episode came out. This episode was part of season 9A. Yeah, a time considered the dark ages by a lot of fans. Seasons 4 and 5 were fine, the plots were still mostly character-driven. The jokes still came from who the characters were and how they clashed. But when we're getting into season 6 and onwards, the show leaned hard into being storyboard-driven, which sounds fine, the practice itself is pretty common. Until you realize that means a lot of episodes were being built around visual gags first, with details of story slapped on later. Instead of finding new creative ground, it just kept recycling old ideas with louder, messier, and meaner visuals. What if Squidward turned into a baby? What if SpongeBob lost his brain? What if Patrick joined a cult? They're rarely about exploring characters. It was about putting them through a blender and hoping something funny would fall out. That's one way to end up with episodes like this. And when that doesn't work, well, just keep hurting Squidward until the episode ends. But let's be honest, the most painful part is that it didn't have to be like this. The thing is, the idea itself isn't the main problem. Squidward gets a head injury and SpongeBob has to care for him? That's not a terrible setup. In fact, done right, it could have been a really solid character episode. They prove that in Can You Spare a Dime? Or maybe you could play it as a reversal. SpongeBob and Patrick genuinely trying to help Squidward for once. Learning what it's like to be the responsible one. Trying to bond with someone who's always hated them. And failing, awkwardly, but maybe learning something in the end. Or maybe it becomes a parody of parental anxiety. SpongeBob overreacting to every little bump, spiraling, treating Squidward like he's made of glass. Meanwhile, Patrick is the chill dad who just wants to play. Even if they did want to keep the weird baby angle, they could have at least had someone in the episode treat it like it was weird. Instead, they built the whole thing around a single joke and squeezed it until it went limp. What a shame. So, why is this the most hated SpongeBob episode? Simply put, people hate this episode because it has no sense of what it's actually doing. It's tone deaf, it's visually uncomfortable, and worst of all, they think this is funny. I don't think the fandom overreacted. They didn't take it too seriously. They actually recognized what this was. A lazy, bizarre mess that nobody asked for and somehow got made anyway. And that's why Squid Baby deserves the title of the most hated SpongeBob episode. SpongeBob is supposed to be silly and awesome. You know, comfort food for the brain. But sometimes it was traumatizing. You remember this, even if you wish you didn't. And if you grew up in the early 2000s, this scene burned into our brains. Or if you were like me, you never looked at toenail clippers the same way again. Somehow, this adorable nautical fever dream managed to give us childhood PTSD. Just with one overambitious house tour and one very unlucky foot. It's a quiet afternoon in Conch Street. Squidward's at home, tea in hand, cookies stacked up, humming along to his favorite show, House Fancy. It's like MTV Cribs for the 1%, where snobs show off their jacuzzis, chandeliers, and mahogany bidets. He's vibing, life is good. Until Squilliam shows up.
Hello, peasants.
Now, if you grew up on SpongeBob, you know what's coming. Squilliam Fancyson, Squidward's rich, smug high school rival, is back. And this time, he's not just flexing his cash. He's doing a live home tour, showing off jewel-encrusted toilet paper holders, a whirlpool elevator, and yes, a 130-foot golden unibrow statue. Naturally, Squidward loses it. His ego's bruised, his pride's aching. He panics, calls the House Fancy program, and somehow ends up promising a live TV tour of his own house in just 2 hours, just to prove he's better than Squilliam's. And that's when it all goes to hell, because, of course, SpongeBob shows up. Uninvited, unbothered, already halfway through the window like a raccoon. He offers to help, and Squidward, running out of time, gives him one simple job. Just paint over this tiny faded spot on the wall. So, what does SpongeBob do? Turns the entire room into a modern art disaster.
Well, it all looked kind of faded.
Now they're in panic mode. The house looks like it was attacked by a colorblind tornado. Led by desperation, Squidward tells SpongeBob to help move the sofa, and that's when it happens.
Now don't move it till I say, ow! Okay, it's on my foot. Now don't.
Okay.
The toenail scene. SpongeBob moves the sofa, too early, and smashes it into Squidward's foot. Repeatedly, back and forth. It's not just a crunch, it's a wet snap. A squelch that plays in your head years after you hear it. A scene that no kid was emotionally ready for. Not then, not now. But wait, the disaster is just warming up. Squidward tells SpongeBob to vacuum the mess, but ends up vacuuming all the furniture and also vacuuming himself in the process. Squidward's on the verge of a mental breakdown, and who shows up at the door? It's Patrick. He just wants to use the toilet, also breaking it by flushing something that can only be described as an abomination. Seriously, what did my guy eat this morning? Then the vacuum just explodes, finishing all the chaos. The house is ruined, the dream is over. Or is it? Because in some wild twist of fate, the host, Nikki, sees the destroyed mess and calls it post-primitive brilliance.
What you have done here harkens back to the illustrious post-primitive movement popularized by famous designer Saul Limkins.
Don't ask me why. Squidward wins, and he's crowned the House Fancy Prince of the Year. Yep, despite the drama, Squidward actually wins. It's one of those rare moments where Squidward gets a W over Squilliam, and hey, good for him. But let's be honest, it's not what anyone remembers. What we do remember is that toenail. SpongeBob has plenty of gross moments over the years, but this one was different. It felt personal. Because unfortunately, this pain is relatable in the worst possible way. If you ever stubbed your toe on a table leg, this scene unlocked a new fear. Even now, people still talk about it. It's the most goriest thing SpongeBob has done. I actually got a toenail torn off once, and now I can't watch that scene without feeling the pain. Or even, I can't look at my own toes without having a PTSD flashback from that scene. And honestly, I don't blame you. You're just vibing, laughing, enjoying some dumb cartoon one afternoon, and then BAM! Toenail. But aside from the toenail scene, the rest of the episode is actually great. The dialogue is funny, Squilliam is there, good toilet joke, Patrick won. And for once, Squidward is actually winning. Hell yeah. But maybe that's why this episode sticks with us. For a lot of us, House Fancy was the first time SpongeBob really betrayed our trust. It lulled us in with comedy and left us limping out, holding our feet. And as bad as House Fancy was, it wasn't even the worst pain, because Nickelodeon looked at the toenail scene and said, let's make a whole episode like that. If you thought one moment was bad, try a full 11 minutes of squishy and festering thumb pain. This one starts with the Krusty Krab. Everything's normal, SpongeBob's on his usual energy, opening the restaurant, stacking ingredients, tossing buns with his bums, you know, the regular OSHA violations. And then, he falls. Right into a pile of swords and scissors and broken jars of tartar sauce. But somehow, none of that hurts him. What does hurt him, however, is when he trips after that. The splinter scene. And this isn't just a regular splinter. It's grotesque. It's jammed so deep into his thumb, it might have hit bone. The animators clearly did not hold back. We see him try to pull it out, first gently, then with spatulas, then with his teeth. The animators, they zoom in on every failed attempt. You can hear the skin stretching, you feel the pain. By minute 4, SpongeBob's thumb looks like it's made of rotten ham, and it only gets worse. At this point, SpongeBob starts losing it. He's trying to hide the splinter to avoid being sent home, which, honestly, relatable. Nothing strikes fear in the heart of a workaholic like forced time off. Squidward sees this as his golden opportunity and turns into a corporate narcissist faster than you can say unpaid leave. He even flushes SpongeBob's hat and spatula down the toilet, enjoying the drama. But here's the thing. Both Squidward and Krabs don't care about SpongeBob's well-being. This whole episode is corporate satire wrapped in biological horror. SpongeBob is literally falling apart at the thumb, and everyone's like, but did the patties get flipped? And as if things are not bad enough, SpongeBob turns to the worst possible choice, Dr. Patrick. That's right, SpongeBob calls Patrick for medical help. And this man shows up in a garbage can wearing a stethoscope made of soup lids. Patrick tried DIY surgery, tried garbage therapy, says it'll help relieve the pressure. SpongeBob's sweating, fading, his thumb is throbbing, pulsing, nothing is going well for him. Eventually, Mr. Krabs shows up, sees the thumb, and nearly faints. But the splinter? He pulls it out effortlessly. The pain ends with a pop, a confetti explosion, and yeah, more pus. Because what's a trauma if not festive? The ending joke is supposed to be about workers' compensation and how Squidward injures himself for money. But let's be real, no one remembers that. All we remember is the thumb. That swollen, infected, and pulsating nightmare of a thumb. The crazy thing is, the tension of this episode isn't even about the plot. It's about how much more disgusting can this get before someone passes out. And spoiler alert, that someone is us. Let me be honest, I couldn't even finish this episode when I was a kid. I had to turn it off halfway. It made me afraid of splinters. Every time I got one after that, I half expected it to explode or start pulsing. And again, I wasn't the only one. It's been over a decade since season 6 aired, and yet people still talk about these episodes. They still bring them up in comment threads, in the comments, in therapy. Sometimes it doesn't take a horror movie to traumatize a kid. Sometimes all it takes is a splinter. Looking back now, you can't help but ask the question, why did Nickelodeon let this happen? I mean, seriously, those episodes didn't just flirt with being gross. It sprinted past the line, popped it like a pimple, and rubbed it on your screen. But I don't think it was a mistake. This was the era. Season 6 and 7 of SpongeBob were a whole different beast. The art style changed, characters looked more stretched, more exaggerated, like living rubber bands. The writing leaned way harder into shock value, less story, more slapstick, more close-ups, more pus, more why is this even allowed to air energy. Episodes like To Love a Patty, Pet or Pests, Stuck in the Ringer, all had that same gross, almost mean-spirited edge. The show had already peaked in popularity, and now they were experimenting, seeing how far they could stretch things. Some people think they were trying to chase the shock humor of adult cartoons, like Family Guy or Ren and Stimpy, even early South Park. Others say the writers were just burnt out and throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to make the kids laugh with slapstick pain and gooey zoom-ins. But the weird part? It kinda worked. People kept watching even if it made them gag. Cartoons can go wild with the logic, the physics, the jokes, but pain hits different. It sticks. When you're just a kid, you don't have the language to process it. You just know you got a splinter once, and it hurt, and now SpongeBob is making it 10 times worse. You see Squidward's toenail get ripped off and your own toes start curling. Your brain works that way. And even years later, that part of your brain still tenses up when someone says, house fancy. You still flinch when you move a couch. You still hesitate before pulling out a splinter. They taught us how fragile comfort can be, how fast a joke can become a nightmare, how one moment can ruin your whole day and stay in your head for years. That's actually kind of powerful, right? We always say, it's just a cartoon. But episodes like House Fancy and The Splinter prove it's never just that. So yeah, thanks for that, SpongeBob. And if a cartoon about a sponge can still make you curl your toes 15 years later, maybe it was doing something more than just being gross. Or maybe Nickelodeon just lost its damn mind for a while. Either way, the damage is done.
Where did everybody go?
You guys have probably seen this episode. It's the Gone episode from season 6. The one where SpongeBob wakes up and the entire town has vanished. You know, this episode has been sitting in the back of my mind for years, and for a strange reason too. For the longest time, I thought it was just a mean-spirited joke episode. The setup is absurd, the ending smells fishy, and it feels like everyone was just having a laugh at SpongeBob's expense. It's one of those weird season 6 episodes. Then again, SpongeBob made weird episodes all the time, but I don't know, this one feels different to me. I just refuse to believe the whole no SpongeBob day. I feel like this episode hides so much more explanation. And if you know me, I'm pretty much committed to solving the true meaning behind this episode. Truth be told, Gone might be one of the biggest cover-ups in Bikini Bottom history. SpongeBob wakes up in the morning, wrestles with his alarm clock, puts on his pants, and heads to the kitchen to feed Gary. Except, Gary doesn't show up, not even a meow. This is our first clue, keep that in mind. SpongeBob figures he's just out and about, so he goes to say good morning to Squidward, but also no answer, or groan. He then tries Patrick's Rock, same result. Okay, this is getting weird. If this was real life, I'd be thinking, this is weird. Someone just made all my neighbors vanish. What else could they take from me without me even knowing? Which is exactly why I use Surfshark VPN. Because the last thing you want is to wake up and realize your personal information has mysteriously disappeared. Only this time, it's not a SpongeBob plot, it's a data breach. Surfshark 1 doesn't just give you a VPN, it comes with antivirus and personal data monitoring. So you get alerts if your info ever leaks online. Think about it. If Bikini Bottom had Surfshark, SpongeBob could have gotten a notification the moment his neighbors were gone. And the VPN part, that's my favorite. 1, it keeps all your browsing secure so no one can sniff around, not your ISP, not hackers, not even Patrick. 2, you can change your location to unlock content from anywhere. I've used it to stream shows only available in other countries and to get cheaper prices on flights just by being in a different location. So whether you're avoiding cyber threats or just trying to find the cheapest way to Bikini Bottom, Surfshark's got you covered. Go to surfshark.com/sponge or use code SPONGE at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN for free. You can try it for 30 days, and if you don't like it, you'll get your money back. Guaranteed. They're not crabs, after all. All right, back to Bikini Bottom. By the time SpongeBob walks to work, the streets are empty. No background fish, no traffic, just a single boat abandoned in the road like someone left in a hurry. And SpongeBob, being the oblivious sponge he is, totally unfazed. He later spends the entire day at the Krusty Krab waiting for someone to show up, but nobody comes. And SpongeBob said it's just a slow day at work. When he walks past Mr. Krabs' office, it's empty too. SpongeBob just arrived at his home when he realized Gary's food was still untouched. So he rushed over to Squidward's to search for Gary, but he doesn't find him either. Squidward's clarinet is cold, Patrick's house is empty, Mr. Krabs' office is empty, Sandy's dome is empty. Everywhere he looks, there's nothing. And this is where the tension starts to creep in. Everyone in Bikini Bottom is gone at the same time. He even runs around the city confirming every building is abandoned.
Gone! Gone!
So what's SpongeBob's plan to deal with this disaster? He decides to keep the memory of Bikini Bottom alive by role-playing as the entire town himself. Which is weirdly quick, to say the least. Everybody's gone in a single night and you don't even question it? SpongeBob doesn't even bother thinking what might cause it. Or maybe where they could go. No, he just accepts that he's the last person in the city and will roleplay the whole civilization by himself. That's SpongeBob for you. At first, SpongeBob's actually thriving. The whole imitation gag is funny. Using his shape-shifting abilities, SpongeBob successfully manages to mimic everyone in Bikini Bottom. He captures Squidward's hatred for him perfectly. He plays how cheap Krabs is. He also does a very good impression of Patrick, Sandy, even Mrs. Puff. After a while though, SpongeBob realizes how pointless this is and cries over how alone and unhappy he'll be.
I can't replace everyone! I'll never be happy again!
Welcome to Squidward's world, SpongeBob. However, SpongeBob realizes that since no one's around, he can get his driver's license easily, and does so. Well, at least there's no one SpongeBob can run over with his boat, so that's good. Every day's an endless SpongeBob holiday. Just him, his boat, and the open road. He even names his boat Bodie. They hang out, they bathe together, they jellyfish together. It's weirdly wholesome, in that Tom Hanks and Wilson kind of way. And that's the thing about being alone. The good part feels amazing until it doesn't. And for SpongeBob, the drop is fast. What started as quirky roleplay and joyrides turns into something darker. Paranoia, talking to a vehicle, and slowly losing the plot.
I thought I'd go crazy without all my friends and acquaintances around.
And just when I thought this episode couldn't spiral more, Bodie actually seems kind of alive. Yeah, I don't know about that. And then there's the Krabby Patty Patrick puppet that's apparently warning him about it. SpongeBob's having full conversations with meat and an engine. The French narrator casually drops,
3 days later.
And suddenly the happy isolation montage is gone. SpongeBob is spiraling now, scribbling in his diary about vehicles watching him, screaming at passing boats, and running like his life depends on it. And whether you call it cabin fever, paranoia, or straight-up schizophrenia, the result is the same. SpongeBob fears any vehicle. He runs around the city avoiding boats, but keeps finding one, because he runs to a boat dealership and watches a race-themed movie. Driven into a corner, he grabs an axe, sees a bus coming down the road, and hacks at it with the axe. Boom. Everyone comes back.
You're all still alive?
Mr. Krabs then says it's just National No SpongeBob Day, a harmless holiday where they all take a break from him. And SpongeBob, despite living through days of isolation, just accepts it, even saying that he felt honored by it. Roll credits. So many unexplained things in this episode, man. Either SpongeBob just lived through the fastest mental breakdown in history, or Bikini Bottom is hiding something. Okay, so according to Mr. Krabs, this was all because of National No SpongeBob Day, a day where everyone in Bikini Bottom, friends, neighbors, even his pet, packs up and leaves town just to avoid him. And we're supposed to believe that's it? Now sure, I can buy Squidward signing up for that in a heartbeat. Mrs. Puff? Absolutely, she probably pitched the idea. Even Krabs, yeah, I get it. He's not exactly a quality time kind of boss. But Sandy? Gary? Patrick? You know what? Patrick is dumb. He might not realize what he agreed to. I'll give him that. But still, these are SpongeBob's closest friends. I just don't buy the idea that they would all go this far. And then there's the shady timeline. SpongeBob says he's been alone for weeks. We've seen him live through multiple day-night cycles, bond with a boat, build a meat puppet best friend, and develop paranoia. The French narrator also says, 3 days later, partway through. Yes, Krabs jokes that they're milking it quite a bit, but come on. I don't believe this entire town would vanish for that long just for a silly holiday. And when you line up all the cues, empty streets, missing pets, a warped sense of time, and the perfect timed return, the holiday excuse starts feeling a lot more like a cover story. And here's the thing, this wouldn't be the first time they've done it. You realize this whole town has a history of disappearing overnight, right? If there's one thing I've said over and over again, it's that the people of Bikini Bottom are, well, jerks. They'll mock you, laugh at you, turn on you the second it's convenient, all for a cheap laugh or personal gain. But if there's something that will bring these people together, it's survival. Think about episodes like Wormy or Once Bitten. When anything disastrous or harmful comes into Bikini Bottom, everyone drops what they're doing and moves as one. Doesn't matter if it's a butterfly, mad snail disease, or Patrick writing a song, if there's even a hint of danger, they instantly become a single-minded mob. Heck, even in the Alaskan bullworm episode, they didn't just evacuate, they physically moved the entire town by pushing it across the seafloor in less than a day. What I'm trying to say is, Bikini Bottom is familiar with disasters. These people know exactly how to vanish when they have to. And Gone fits that pattern perfectly. Empty streets before sunrise, pets gone too, well, aside from Shelly, SpongeBob's clam, but that barely counts. They also managed to execute this precisely. Not a single slip up in days. No returning stragglers, no overhead chatter, they are scarily good at this. Now, let's say they actually evacuate from something. Then our next question is, what are they actually running from? Here's where things get interesting. Let's rewind to what SpongeBob actually experiences while he's alone. At first, it's harmless coping, imitating Squidward, pretending to be Mr. Krabs, sleeping under Patrick's rock. That's just SpongeBob filling the silence the only way he knows how. But the longer he's alone, the stranger it gets. He starts talking with Bodhi, treating him like a best friend. Then we get the Krabby Patty Patrick puppet, made entirely out of meat, that somehow talks back to him and warns him about Bodhi. There's also a real possibility none of these talking things actually happen. Could all be hallucinations stitched together by his brain to make sense of the silence. By the end, SpongeBob is scribbling in his diary about vehicles talking to him, running from boats in the street, and swinging an axe at a bus full of people.
Huh?
If it isn't already obvious to you, this is a textbook isolation-induced hallucination. SpongeBob could just be imagining being haunted by Bodhi and Meaty Patrick simply because he just wants interactions with someone. Doesn't matter if it's fear. Or maybe something did happen to Bikini Bottom, something that could trigger hallucinations in anyone exposed for too long. Could be some kind of fungi, or maybe algae bloom, or chemical leak, or another kind of magic dust like Squidward's inhale in Clarinet Land. I don't have a certain answer yet. It could be anything. Whatever it was, it had to be dangerous enough for Sandy Cheeks, the most rational, resourceful brain in town, to pack up and leave. I know it sounds insane until you realize it actually explains a lot. SpongeBob's having a warped sense of time, mistaking days feeling like weeks. The pets are gone too, especially Sandy's pet. We don't see any of it in her dome. It means sensitive animals were taken for protection. Which also makes the ending even weirder, because if SpongeBob was that affected, why wouldn't they just take him with them? Why would they go so far as to leave SpongeBob alone in town? Well, that takes us to the ugliest part of the theory. I hate to say this, but SpongeBob is terrible in a crisis, and the show has proven it repeatedly. Wormy accident is possible simply because he couldn't differentiate between a land creature and a real monster that could eat people. Or take Fungus Among Us. SpongeBob can't even notice a contagious sea fungus on top of his head. Even when he does, he just ignores it, thinking everything will be alright. And not to mention the countless explosions he did for Bikini Bottom. So if you're trying to move hundreds of people quickly and quietly, he's a liability. He'll slow you down or draw attention or try to help in the most dangerous way possible. And Bikini Bottom knows it. They've been through enough disasters to recognize a liability when they see one. Now you might be thinking, well, isn't Patrick the same, if not worse? Why does he get to evacuate but not SpongeBob? And here's where the theory takes a darker turn. Maybe they believed SpongeBob would be the least affected by whatever this was. I mean, he's a sponge. He could absorb some deadly toxins and survive, right? Or maybe just dumb luck made him their best test subject. And if that's true, then the Gone timeline looks a lot different. First, they get intel about something dangerous, probably from Sandy giving her scientific background. They don't know how lethal it'll be, but they do have a hypothesis. SpongeBob might survive exposure better than anyone else. But they can't tell him. If he knew, he'd do something reckless. So, they leave without warning. They know SpongeBob won't go looking, he'll just accept it. And for a while, it works. But they also monitor him from a distance, and are ready to get back as soon as they decide it's safe, or worse, when they need to evacuate SpongeBob too. The latter actually happened. SpongeBob spiraled into hallucination and they decided to pick him up, so they went back to Bikini Bottom right when SpongeBob almost lost it, and fed him the harmless lie of National No SpongeBob Day. In other words, the experiment fails, SpongeBob didn't survive it. So they put another subject to the test, Patrick Star, for the same reason as SpongeBob. Because he's not smart enough to remember what happened. So yeah, National No SpongeBob Day is just a convenient cover story. One SpongeBob and Patrick would believe, one that wouldn't make them ask questions. But yeah, there's still a lot of unexplained things in Gone. It's one of those episodes where the more you dig, only more questions come to the surface. Was it really just a holiday? Was there something dangerous in Bikini Bottom? Or was it all in SpongeBob's head? Whatever the answer is, it doesn't change the part that really sticks with me. This is still a story about SpongeBob being left behind by the people he loves. It's cold, it's calculated, and it hurts, even if he doesn't realize it. Modern SpongeBob is bad. The characters lost their souls. It was one of the biggest degradations we've seen in the animation industry. Seeing how much critique and hate there are for the modern episodes, I figured we'd hit rock bottom already. Surely it can't be any worse. But then I saw this. This isn't just another bad episode. This might be the worst episode in modern SpongeBob. And yes, the nitwitting was bad. Ink Lemonade was worse. I even endured the spin-offs. But those were nothing compared to Plain to See. This one had everything that makes modern SpongeBob bad. Let's zoom out a bit to give you some context. Season 13 isn't just a weak season. It's one of the lowest rated seasons in the show's history. Out of the first 8 episodes, 5 scored under a 6. That's bad even by post-season 4 standards. You probably haven't seen a losing streak like this since the infamous Dark Age of SpongeBob, something you and I will never forget, Season 7. The season that gave us disasters like A Pal for Gary, Stuck in the Ringer, and of course, One Course Meal. A streak of nightmares so painful that it made some fans quit the show entirely, and honestly, I don't blame them. Fast forward to Season 13, and my god, it's still the same playbook, only worse in execution. They still torture Squidward as the main joke for the entire episode in Squidward's sick days. Patrick's still dumb and mean to everyone, even managed to turn into a rabid dog for no real reason in Pat the Dog. I don't even remember what the episode is all about. SpongeBob is still being obnoxiously annoying towards everyone. They even have an episode, Sea Sponge Haters Club, where Squidward runs a literal We Hate SpongeBob club with Mrs. Puff, Bubble Bass, and the Mr. Mailman from Something Smells. They all basically just rant on what they hate about SpongeBob. The joke is really dull at this point. For Mrs. Puff's section, it's basically the same thing we always see with her, just in a creepier visual. And whatever this is with the Pickle Bass. These episodes don't just have disturbing visuals, they seem obsessed with humiliating Squidward. Oops. Which, if you watch our previous videos, you know very well that I hate it with every fiber of my being. With a starting lineup this bad, I thought, surely this is rock bottom. You cannot make something worse than this, right? But no, they gave us Plain to See. And this one doesn't just cross the line, it punts it into the ocean. The story opens with SpongeBob and Patrick giving Squidward a surprise, that Squidward had won a lottery ticket for a trip to see Bora Bora Bottom.
But I didn't enter any contest.
Turns out they entered it for him, without his consent, of course.
We entered it for you, and only 6,000 times, too.
On paper, this seems kinda sweet, right? In the newer seasons, it's rare to see SpongeBob and Patrick doing anything nice for Squidward, so maybe they're turning a corner? No, of course not. The trip package is for a family, so naturally SpongeBob and his rock-for-brain friends will join this trip as a family. You know where this is going. So the three of them set off to the airport to collect the prize, with SpongeBob and Patrick playing as Squidward's children. I guess they disguised themselves as a family because the prize is specifically intended for a family. But do you guys really have to be his children? You could say that you guys were cousins. But anyway, the lady congratulated them. They even took a photo together as commemorative moments. Honestly, this was the one moment where I laughed. Not because it was clever, but because it was so visually disturbing, I had to pause. Now, before we continue with the story, at this point I was thinking that this will actually be a funny episode. The three of them going on a trip in a plane is definitely going to be chaos, as we all know, but seeing the title of the episode, Plane to Sea, I was expecting something like Club SpongeBob. The episode where the three of them got catapulted into a wild forest. So they had to go through many hardships together simply to survive. That episode was one of the best in this show, and my personal favorite too, so my hopes were high for this one. But it didn't take long before my blind expectation was ruined. Because SpongeBob and Patrick immediately became mean to Squidward.
I think you're in my seat, Pop.
And I'll take the aisle.
The flight attendant was also being mean to Squiddy. I guess the whole town just hates Squidward for no reason, huh? Then comes the classic modern SpongeBob routine. Tie down Squidward and let the chaos rip. SpongeBob and Patrick run around the plane like hyperactive toddlers on 5 pounds of sugar. Patrick literally turns himself into a balloon and starts bouncing off of people. And this goes around for the 12 hours of the flight. And the passengers? Silent. Nobody says anything. Poor Squidward just sat there crying on his fate. Ugh, who raised this baby? What's with everyone hating Squidward these days? But the torture is far from over. In fact, Fatrick is just about to start. Patrick, who apparently can't tell the difference between a bathroom door and an emergency exit, straight up launches both flight attendants out of the plane. Meanwhile, Squidward tries to hit the call button. What was that? A finger pops out of his nose? I thought this kind of gross out visual humor retired like a decade ago. It's not edgy anymore, it's just gross. And of course, the shows continue to torture Squidward again.
Squidward, you really like coffee!
This picture just throws me back to that Ink Lemonade episode, man. I hate it. And it keeps getting more annoying because instead of stopping, SpongeBob joins in. The two of them dress up as flight attendants and begin throwing snacks at passengers, also crashing into Squidward in the process. Why were no passengers scolding them? Did you guys just sit still watching two idiots crashing everything? Someone has to call them out at this point. But no, they continue to make a mess. This time, somehow, and don't ask me how, they also managed to eject both pilots from the cockpit. And who's left to fly the plane? Take a wild guess. It's Squidward, because of course it is. While he's sweating bullets trying not to crash and kill everyone on board, SpongeBob and Patrick are behind him cracking jokes.
Squidward, trust your instincts.
I suppose.
Look, Squidward, we're almost there. Now all you gotta do is land this thing.
And not kill everyone!
What? Excuse you. You caused the whole problem, and now you're taunting the one guy who's actually trying to fix it? This is textbook gaslighting. Honestly, it's abusive. They turned this man's breakdown into a punchline. Somehow they managed to land, and just to make sure we all feel properly insulted, the plan lands perfectly on autopilot.
It was on autopilot the whole time.
Squidward! You did nothing!
Huh, what a surprise. And just like that, they strip him of even the illusion of competence. Squidward suffers 12 hours of hell in a metal tube and all he gets is humiliation at the finish line? I know new Patrick is a bully and this is no surprise, but SpongeBob too? This is beyond help. It just feels like they are purposely teasing Squidward for the whole flight, and even guilt-tripping him for almost killing everyone on the plane. Imagine this happened to you. You get dragged onto a trip you didn't ask for, 2 lunatics call you daddy, strap you to a chair, throw food everywhere, eject the flight crew, and when you finally try to stop the plane from crashing into the ocean, they made fun of you. Then the plane lands on autopilot and they say you did nothing. That's not comedy. That's psychological torture with obnoxious sound. But wait, the punch in the gut hasn't landed yet. Because when they arrive at Bora Bora Bottom, Squidward thinks, finally, peace, vacation, sun, quiet. Then SpongeBob drops the bomb.
You want a trip to see Bora Bora Bottom, not stay there, silly.
I don't even have a joke here. That was just cruel. You know what? At this point, I do feel like all of this commotion was part of the plan. Like they were actually planning to take Squidward on a stupid trip, throw at the flight crew on purpose, hence why all of them have parachutes. None of the passengers say anything for the whole episode because they were paid actors. Then they gaslight Squidward by telling him to save the plane and the passengers, and in the end, they all bully sad boy Squidward because he's actually buying all that crap.
Oh, life is funny, isn't it?
No, life is not funny. Not when you've just been emotionally waterboarded for 12 hours straight. This weary, bitter, clarinet-loving man thought he was going to be able to rest for the first time in years. And instead, he finds out it was just a round-trip ride with psychological torment. And the finale? SpongeBob and Patrick hijack the plane again to take everyone back.
Looks like we're experiencing some headwinds. And the present estimate for our return flight to Bikini Bottom is 24 hours!
Yeah, this was part of their plan since the beginning. I'm convinced now. This is how the episode ends. Just more loud, dumb chaos, and the show patting itself on the back like it did something clever. This episode is a case study in how to absolutely butcher everything that made classic SpongeBob special. There's no real story here, no emotional arc, the characters were flanderized, and no clever setup or satisfying punchline. Just loud noises, random cruelty, and non-stop humiliation of a character we're supposed to care about. And yes, it's technically well animated. The colors are vibrant, the motion is fluid, there are 1,000 expressions per second, but none of it means anything. Visual clutter is meant to distract you from the fact that there's no soul left in the writing. Maybe this episode was meant to be a slapstick farce. Maybe the writers thought, wouldn't it be funny if Patrick treated a plane like a jungle gym? Sure, if the jokes landed. But what we got instead was non-stop screaming, weird hyper-realistic visuals, and Squidward as a human, or octopus, punching bag. The humor is just noise. It's chaos for chaos' sake. I even forget what this is all about right after watching the episode. You see, I did briefly mention the Club SpongeBob episode at the start. Do you know what makes that episode so good? Some of the best episodes in the show, like Idiot Box, Band Geeks, and Club SpongeBob, all have one thing in common. They all utilize the dynamic relationship between SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward to their best. Those episodes showcase each character's different ideology and traits. Silly SpongeBob being too naive and optimistic towards everyone, Squidward as the pessimistic and grounded character, and Patrick being the sweet, dumb, ride-or-die friend who is always in for the adventure. Put them in unique situations like catapulted into deep forest with no supplies, and you get yourself a magic adventure. The show was at its best when the plot was unpredictable. When the gag and the plot were so well written, it didn't give a chance for the character to become brainless. Those early episodes were good because it had moments where the characters had intellect and actually interacted with each other to try to solve the problem. In this episode, SpongeBob doesn't even have a single frame where he's actually trying to help Squidward to solve anything. Remember Band Geeks, when grumpy Squidward tries to prove himself to Squilliam? SpongeBob and everyone steps up with his goofy yet sincere support, and Patrick doing whatever this is.
Is mayonnaise an instrument?
Or the camping episode, where they all sing around a campfire, get attacked by a sea bear, and for once, Squidward joins in the chaos. But it makes sense. Now fast forward to Plane to Sea, none of that is here. Classic SpongeBob gave us characters reacting to the world. Modern SpongeBob just feels like it's reacting to itself. They're not even bothering to put in some actual characters. Patrick is now purposefully torturing Squidward. SpongeBob goes along with Patrick and becomes a smiling sadist. And Squidward? He's just a punching bag for the whole episode. For all that Squidward has been through, this man deserves a vacation. Instead, he gets plain trauma, emotional abuse, and the same disrespect the writers keep giving him every season post-season 4. Plain to See is the worst kind of SpongeBob episode. It doesn't just miss the mark, it forgets what the target even was. It's loud, mean-spirited, ugly, and lazy. But what irritates me the most is that this episode could be good if they actually put some writing into it. Let's imagine the same setup. SpongeBob and Patrick win a trip for Squidward, but instead of becoming his illegitimate children, what if they actually tried to give him a real break? They try to take care of Squidward, and not accidentally hurt him in the process. Then, somewhere along the way, the plane does run into trouble, like crashing into the sea, and for once, they all have to work together to survive in the open seas. Make Patrick dumb but helpful. Make SpongeBob optimistic but clumsy. Give Squidward a moment of peace before the chaos hits. Build to the disaster instead of starting with it. Boom! Now you've got an episode worthy to be called Plain to See. And look, if you genuinely enjoy this newer SpongeBob style, I respect that. Seriously. You like what you like, you're not wrong for that. But if you grew up with the golden era of SpongeBob, with smart writing, memorable stories, and actual emotional range, this feels like watching your favorite band come back 20 years later with 0 of the original members and no understanding of what made the music special. It just hurts. And Squidward? I know you're fictional, but man, you deserve better. Much better. So yeah, Plain to See is everything wrong with modern SpongeBob packed into 11 minutes of suffering. If Squidward ever writes a memoir, this episode is the traumatic flashback chapter.
I made a whole video digging into who these characters really are on every other show they've ever touched. And I promise you, once you hear it, you can't unhear it. You'll never watch SpongeBob the same way again. It's right up here, go watch it next. Until then, I'll see you on the next dive.